Hello, everybody, and welcome to the deepest dive on God of War Ragnarok from MinnMax. MinnMax is a place about games, friends, and getting better. My name is Ben Hansen, and thank God I'm not alone. I'm joined by returning champion Suriel Vazquez.
Hi, do you think you'd ever do one of these by yourself? Just talk about a game for 13 hours?
It would be an interesting challenge. That'll be like when I retire, when MinnMax has just crumbled, it'll just be me monologuing slowly, talking about Amplitude on PS2. So look forward to that, everybody.
You could lean real hard on user comments and just read those for 3 hours.
That's right, that's right. Tune into the Jeff Gersman podcast, everybody. That's everybody's future. Suriel, should we call you consultant for games / YouTube essayist, or what do you prefer these days? What's your title?
Sure, I'm a video game consultant and essayist, I guess, is what I'm doing right now.
Right on. Yeah, congratulations on launching that channel. Yeah,
thanks. It's been fun. It's been something I've been kind of kicking around for most of the year, and so I finally pulled the trigger on that one. And I'm excited to keep working on that and also doing consulting stuff on the side.
Right on. Yeah, there's a link below for all that fun stuff, or it's in the description at least. We're also joined by Indie Informer's Jill Grote, everybody.
What?
Welcome, Jill. Welcome. You were on a recent episode of the MinnMax Show podcast unpacking your love of mythology and trying to predict where God of War was going. So we know that you know a lot about Norse mythology. Here's a weird thing for this discussion that I want to throw out there. I am so wary of spoilers for this game. I don't even want Norse mythology spoilers. Do you know what I mean? I don't want you to be like, well, this is clearly foreshadowing that this is going to happen because it happened in the old myths. Do you think that's too far, Kyle Bossman?
That's too far. That's too far. Because I feel like they presume you already know what these two wolves are and everything. You know what I mean? Like they assume we know, and they're like, and this is our twist on it.
Right. That's what I've seen a lot. Is like, this is what you expect to happen. Haha.
Yeah. Maybe. I think there's maybe like the high level stuff. Like we have a rough idea of who Odin might be and who Loki might be for like general stuff. But when it comes to like specifics of tier and stuff like that, I feel like the less said, the better off we might be. But look, I'm not going to be too militant about it. But
I think it can be interesting as context. So for something like, we are going to spoil the original God of War, right? I think that's fair game to talk about. So something like the Loki thing in the original God of War. Anyone who knew about, Norse mythology wasn't necessarily going to make that his son is clearly Loki, right? Like that's a way in which they played with your expectations of Norse mythology. So I think even if like there's an allusion early on to something like, oh, this is part of this Greek mythology, then the game still has this opportunity to like twist your knowledge on it. So I think to have that as background, I think can be interesting because it's all speculation until we know for sure, right?
Yeah. All right. So Jill, you can use 35% of your Norse mythology.
Yeah, knowledge. I just crossed out all of my notes. Don't worry.
Yeah, we can just boot you from the call. That's no problem. Jumping the gun there. Delayed.
I got another question. Before we even talk about who I am. I got another question for Jill.
Yeah.
Isn't that in Norse mythology, like Ragnarok hasn't happened yet, right?
Right.
It's always something that will happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fun debate to have because like at the Hansen, plug your ears. At the end of Ragnarok, like 2 humans live and repopulate the world. So like we could be living in a post-Ragnarok situation, but like I think most people consider Ragnarok to not have happened. Yeah, even though I was reading this weird thing that it's supposed to have happened in 2014. Shock, it didn't.
It may have.
They should have made the news.
It's similar to like the Judeo-Christian apocalypse where there's just like, this has not happened yet, but here's how we know it will. Here are the signs that will indicate that it will happen, and here's how it's going to go down. It's like we know exactly what will happen, but it hasn't happened yet.
It'd be nice if there was just an official spokesperson for Norse mythology, though, and they could just come out and be like, "Yeah, it happened. People aren't talking about the gods anymore, but it was wild for a while there. In 2014, you should have seen this. It was absolutely out of this world." Okay, delayed inputs. Kyle Bossman also joining us.
Hey.
Welcome. People are raving about your YouTube channel. Do you feel that love? Does it feel good? Does it feel like you're creating some fun stuff over there? Are you proud of it? Tell me everything you're feeling.
I've had my first accidental YouTube hit where like YouTube's like, yeah, well, let's just pump this one into the algorithm this week.
Ooh.
But no, most of the time I feel like it's fun to have like a low-key YouTube channel. Like, just it's fun to just be a little gremlin and have not too many like people notice it,
Yeah. So genuinely, if your traffic tripled, do you think it would bum you out?
It did triple. I got like triple in normal views.
And it's a bummer.
No.
Okay.
It feels good.
Okay. All right. We got it.
I think that I think there's like as someone who just started a YouTube channel. There's a specific kind of fun when a community is small where you feel like you can be a little bit more responsive, and there's especially someone who's still kind of playing with the format of the video essay. It feels like you have more room to experiment of like, well, if this doesn't work out, if I do something weird and it doesn't work out, then no one saw it anyway, so I can just versus if like every video that I put out, like there's the weight of like, well, what if I have 1 million subscribers and then like I stand to lose 100,000 if I do something stupid, right?
Yeah.
So the stakes are a lot lower, so you feel a little bit more free to experiment.
Yeah, stressed out YouTubers freak me out.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that we could talk about here, but we should probably talk about God of War Ragnarok. This is, just in case you're curious, this is the best, most thorough discussion about God of War Ragnarok on the internet, everybody. And this is a 3-part Game Club discussion. This is just part 1. So for this discussion, we're covering everything in the new game up until you finish the quest Old Friends, which was 7 hours for me, so ballpark that. So we're not going to spoil anything after that point in this discussion for the rest of God of War Ragnarok. We're going to be back the following week and then the week after that. So for next week's discussion, we're going to be covering everything in the game up through the quest called Forging Destinies. So the point is, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's still a very good opportunity for you to jump in and submit your thoughts, because during this discussion, we're going to be reading hundreds of comments from the community. And if you support MinnMax on Patreon, even at that $2 tier, you can jump in and submit your thoughts, and we will read your thoughts in this discussion. And also, if you go to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's, you can unlock the podcast version of the Deepest Dive. All of our previous Deepest Dives, we've covered a ton of games in the past. Kyle joined us for the Deepest Dive on Spider-Man Miles Morales. We've covered Last of Us Part 2. Trying to think, there's a ton of other ones that you can check out there. So please help support the Game Club format if you enjoy it, because we understand it's a weird thing to do, to dive in this deep on one game, but we like doing it. And so any help spreading the word about the Deepest Dive is appreciated. Plus, we are very close to hitting our goal. If we hit 3,200 supporters on Patreon, we're going to stream a cozy holiday feast where we're all going to get together in the studio and have a lot of wine and have a lot of food and jolly good times. So we are literally like 100 people away from that happening. So with this video, we could close that deal. So any help support.
What's a good Norse feast that you can title it as, like a cornucopia type situation?
Yeah. Well, we're just going to be making...
being a literal Latin word, but...
Yeah, we could make the little sausages that they have towards the end of this section of God of War Ragnarok, I believe. So here's a bold plea I'm going to make. Speaking of YouTube, people on YouTube, I beg of thee, please don't spoil anything in the comments. Don't even go near it. I beg of you. Don't get cheeky and be like, interesting, Jill brings that point up, winky winky. You're not as clever as you think. Just don't do it. If you're tempted to be cheeky, just don't comment. Please save everybody the hassle, because you're going to be spoiling things probably for thousands of people. And that's a bad thing to do, and we'll delete your comment right away anyway. So please, be cool, everybody.
Are you tempted to have someone else read the comments for you?
No, it's just too much part of my daily routine is to read those comments. And if it seems like a spoiler, I'll look away real quick.
Them.
Yeah.
Please, sir. I need to know what people think about my hair. There's so many things to get into. Also, heads up that my code, at least, was provided by Sony. Kyle, was yours provided by Sony as well?
No.
Oh, of course not.
They're
I use my real money to buy them. Yeah.
Real human dollars?
It was provided by me. I sponsored this.
All right.
Yep.
Well, there we
I
go.
don't have those kind of connections. I don't think they have my email, man.
Oh, really? What, you work with Keeley? I assume you got everybody just on speed dial, ready to go. Anyways, yeah, it's not a sponsored video or podcast or anything like that, but they do ask that we point that out. So just so y'all know. Okay, Deepest Dive. We literally had 308 comments about the first chunk of God of War. It's one of our highest ever. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake, the final discussion, I think that was like 456 comments. So you're getting there, God of War, but you're no Final Fantasy VII yet. But the point is, we had so many comments over there on Patreon, patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. We like to start these things by asking a little trivia question of, what do y'all think is the most common comment for this section of God of War? What did people write in the most about? Jill, your eyes are lighting up.
I miss boy.
I miss boy. Just those 3 words over and over and over again. Suriel, what's your guess?
It's a tie between.
Coward.
commenting on Atreus, about playing as Atreus, and how do I get this chest?
How do I get this chest? Just one chest in particular, or just in general?
No, just everyone pointing out a different chest of I don't know how to get this one.
Okay, interesting. Kyle, what do you think? Most common comment?
I'm guessing it's a complaint about gabbiness.
Interesting. I think that's a very good guess. That was roughly, this is me ballparking it, that was roughly about 4th in the list of things that we're complaining about or mentioning for the comments. Number 1, by a significant margin, was people talking about Atreus punching that chest and not going all the way through.
No way,
really?
I love that part.
Yeah, not complaining. No, people were just loving that and talking about it in a big way. And then second, maybe it was like journal entries, and then a lot of talk about Atreus and all this stuff. Okay, we should try and work through this thing roughly chronologically if we can. I think it's makes more sense. So you don't have to be too strict about it or whatever. But we have a ton of comments to get to. But yeah, feel free to steer this show wherever you want to go. But Ross Adams, he's getting the table set here by saying, I'd wanted to wait till I got a PS5 to play this, but after Janet Garcia's comments on the MinnMax Show podcast, I got it for PS4. It's not 60 frames per second. That's a bummer, but it looks really beautiful and it runs perfectly on my PlayStation 4 Pro, which is just mind-boggling. I assume the rest of us are playing PS5?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. People are asking for a platform breakdown, but it's awesome that this thing is capable of running on a base PS4. Like every scene in this game, I just keep thinking like, God, is the PS4 really keeping up with this? Hats off to Sony for pulling that off. But, Kyle Bossman, what do you think of the first roughly third-ish of God of War Ragnarok?
What do I think of it?
What do you think of it?
I love this game. I love getting into basically the lake. I like just getting this big open area, just go and solve puzzles, go and fight monsters, upgrade your stuff as it comes, and hear little stories while you're in the boat. I love that, zigzagging around. And so it was pretty crazy they did a lake that early into this game. I assume because they have lots of crazier ideas to come. But that was, the chunk of what we played and the chunk of what I enjoyed most. The whale, man. There's a whale coming out of that lake. That was so sweet.
Yeah, people are really going to unpack that in a big way. People are obsessed with that for sure. Yeah, at a certain point playing this game, I just realized, like, oh yeah, this is all I want from a game. It's just we're going on an adventure and you literally have really no idea what you're going to uncover. It could go any direction. You're going to see some wild stuff. That's about as good as an adventure can get for me. So I am, believe it or not, loving this thing so far. Jill, take a big swig and then tell us exactly how you're feeling about it.
I knew it. As soon as I put that to my lips, I'm like, he's gonna call at me. I'm absolutely enjoying this game. It is a lot of fun. I love sort of how they're playing with things. I love how they are focusing both on like characterizations and kind of pushing the limits of like, I really love performances in this. Like that's really fantastic. In the way that the PS5, again, I have no idea how the PS4 is doing any of this. There has to be some things lost because you're just seeing like this amazing representation of like the very subtle things happening on people's faces and just differences in like fur and leather. And I'm also really glad that we are getting a lot more of variety in this game so far than we have seen in the last one. And also we are getting a variety in like both place and action, which is cool. And kind of just, I heard a lot of people talking about before I started playing, like, oh, if you liked the story or whatever, this might not be for you, but if you like the action, I don't see that. I'm really enjoying a lot of what they're doing with this story and a lot of like having those small beats of really kind of introspectiveness and then big fight scene, and the fight scenes are all really cool and they're all really well paced.
It is the mind-boggling part. Even like in the opening of this game, it's like it starts so slow and so confidently, and then it'll just be bam, now Freya's attacking. Now bam, we're back to like almost it's savoring its pacing in a really bizarre way. Like it has that confidence to be like, we're just going to watch Kratos in that opening shot slowly breathe and look sad for a minute or so. So it's like it's as calm as can be until it's not. And it's such a weird note to start a game on, but I think it's really bold. Suriel, overall, before we start diving in the weeds of the weeds here, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious about, the reaction that Jill mentioned of oh, if you like the story, then it's like, not so good, but like the action stuff is what you're here for, because I feel like that's kind of the opposite of how I'm approaching it, where I think the action, this is especially coming off of like having played the previous game like a couple months ago. The action feels a little bit too familiar, where it doesn't feel like, okay, I'm looking to see how they're going to iterate on the combat, and so far a lot of it has been more refinements than like, oh, this is a really cool new novel trick that they've pulled off. But I think the number one reason I'm here is to see this story. And I feel like the combat is kind of at the bottom of my list of reasons to keep playing the game. But I'm overall like really enjoying like that opening bit that you mentioned is like super killer. And I guess I haven't done as much exploration as a lot of other people, because I didn't even see that whale.
God.
But like, I think because of that, it feels like this game is still kind of in kind of like training wheels mode in terms of like, yeah, you're going to go here. Like this world is going to open up eventually. There's going to be a lot of stuff to do, but it feels like I'm still being funneled a little bit towards like, let's get you started, and then we're going to let you go. And it feels like this kind of first point is maybe the point where they're like, okay, now we're setting you loose to kind of go get collectibles and upgrade armor.
Yeah, now we're really going to start jumping between the realms and exploring. Yeah.
Right. And jumping off of that point too, for the narrative, like with a game with Ragnarok in it, there's not a lot of Ragnarok going on yet for the first third of the game.
Right. Procyon number 6 submits a comment over on Patreon. They say, the game does such a great job at reminding the player that significant time has passed since the first game, and the small cast has grown closer together. My two favorite examples are Atreus telling Sindri that he won't drop him again, showing that these two have been adventuring pretty regularly since we last saw them, and that the bestiary and lore entries are now written by Mimir and Kratos. Kratos has learned to read and write in the new language, and it's no longer curious young Atreus writing the bestiary like in the first game. Yeah, I love that point for sure. It is wild to start this thing, and when Atreus' voice first hits, it's like, oh my God, years and years have passed. And then I even went back and played 2018 and the God of War game a little bit too, and he sounds like a 6-year-old back then. It's just wild. And I remember even like, Suriel and I and Jill all came from Game Informer, and we did the cover story on God of War 2018, so I got to visit the studio for a couple days and all that stuff. And I remember even back then them talking about how tough it was to record Atreus' voice because it was changing so fast, and they're trying to keep it consistent throughout, and had to like re-record stuff. And now I go back and play that old game and say, what? His voice is like, that feels entirely prepubescent compared to, James Earl Jones here for Atreus in the second game. It's really mind-boggling.
They really do demarcate that stuff. I think Atreus is kind of the biggest thing. But, like the voice thing happens to everyone. Kratos used to sound like a pissed off Kermit the Frog. It happens to everyone.
That's right.
But they do that, and then they also kind of, he looks very different. He's got like a very different outfit, which I actually really like that original coat that he's wearing. I wish I kind of could have kept that on for most of the game. But it does feel like, with the relationship they have to Freya, which it's very quick how they address that specific point, because it's like the lingering thing you want to know. But also like they have all these wolves now, right? Like it feels like they have settled. Well, I mean, like they didn't have in the previous game, right? And it feels like they already have established these relationships with these wolves, like to the point where like one of them ends, right? And it feels like they have established even firmer roots in this game than they had before. And I think a lot of it comes off of like the fact that Kratos is now maybe like strangely even more committed to living here even after his wife has died. He's more committed to like living in this area versus like getting up and leaving, and so you kind of see their roots be more established, where it feels like they've kind of expanded. It's not just the hut anymore. It feels like the area around them is a little bit more lived in.
They have the little cave down south and whatnot. If you were as strong as Kratos, don't you think you'd build a bigger house at a certain point? If like lifting trees for you was just the equivalent of, I don't know, lifting a twig, like why not just build a mansion like Valheim if it's just no big deal?
Well, I think it comes back to like the fact that it like the aesthetic of this game is like, the exact opposite of the previous games, right? So it's like you go to Greece and like everything's super large, super ornate, very fancy.
Right.
And I think that, you know, like from like a behind the scenes perspective, it's like, let's do something very different. But for Kratos, it definitely feels like everything about that was so maximalist that, and I want to get away from that. So like, I want to have like the humble little abode as like a way to say that I've moved beyond, you know, like my Greek origins. And also, if you have a smaller hut, like you're less likely to be spotted. Like he does not want to pay attention to, he does not want people to pay attention to him, right? He doesn't want to be found.
Right. So Odin's just like
Kratos. Kratos is a father now, so he's got to think about heating and like how much you're using up and.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so they do get cold?
I imagine so.
Okay, because they talk about like the temperature difference later on. I feel like Atreus, when you're in Svartalheim, it's a lot of talk about like, ooh, gotta enjoy this. This feels so different.
I
and great.
related so much to him at that point.
It does.
Like,
It's a nice Minnesota winter outside right now for here. But I'm just amazed. But if they do get cold, put a hat on. Put a hat on, boys.
He's wearing the thing. He's wearing the fur at the beginning of the game. And
he
it's
should
like
put over his head.
Resident Evil 4, he loses that in battle, and so he just never goes back to it, and then he just starts wearing armor.
It's like to the point where when you get to choose your armor, I put long sleeves on Kratos because I felt cold for him.
That's nice. Just a little hoodie is all I ask. Patrick O'Connor, by the way, submits a comment that has your back there, Suriel. They say, I can't be the only person who's bummed you don't get to keep Kratos' awesome cloak from the intro and box art. I know it's a pain in terms of the physics and clipping, etc., but I'm such a sucker for a big old cloak. Mock me at your peril, Hansen. There are dozens of us. Hey, I'm not mocking the cloak. I mean, there's already a couple people here that have expressed love for the cloak, so clearly it's something.
I wouldn't be surprised if like it's like one of the you get that later on of like, oh, you can find this like kind of this version of the cloak that you can upgrade or whatever later on is like a kind of an end game like secret thing. But it definitely reminded me of Leon Kennedy losing his awesome jacket at the beginning of Resident Evil 4.
Right. You got to do it. Yeah, you got to Metroid the fashion. Shango Congo writes in and says, hey, near the beginning of this game, Kratos puts his hand on Atreus' shoulder with relative ease. It's a simple notion that shows the growth that these two have gone through since the first game. Good stuff, says Shango Congo.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even catch that. The idea of, he's actually now he's touching his kid all the time in a very healthy, positive, fatherly kind of way.
It was the moment right before that is a little dorky. It's Atreus is like looking at a little secret he has.
Right.
Like right in front of his dad. Just like, why are you taking this moment to like look at your little secret? And then he gets touched by his dad. He's like, oh,
that's
like,
what it is.
Fortunately, that thing didn't stay a secret for too long.
Right. It's like
it has something to do with like his power, right? I forget what that little object was.
It's a good question. They haven't really explained it. So that's something that he said he found in one of the secret giant doors. Giant's doors, I guess is the best way to put it, right? Like it's because he explored more than the one where the secret message was relayed. And so that was one that he found somewhere else. But I don't think its purpose is fully out there yet. But it's kind of that weird thing of, it is silly for him to like uncover this like a Playboy mag, like looking behind his shoulder real quick. But it's like, but that's like the
like your dad's right there, bro.
But it's the constraints of the no-cut camera, right? Because like, what are they gonna do? Just like fly to him on the opposite side of their property so he can look at this, and then the camera flies back. Like, it's interesting how. I mean, this is, I'm sure Santa Monica could talk about it for 100 hours, but there's even moments in this section of the game where I feel like instead of plot armor, I feel like Atreus has like camera armor. We're like, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but when he's going on his secret quest later on, it's like, well, I know nothing too bad's going to happen here because they can't just cut back to Kratos in the house. I know that something has to move back. So either it's going to be Sindri running for a long time with the camera next to him, which sounds bad game design wise, or Atreus is going to be fine. He's going to be making his journey back.
You have that much faith in the single take?
I think I do. Yeah. Well, what are they going to do? Like,
I'm telling you, by the end of this game, they will subvert your expectations of the single take.
Really?
Yeah, that's honestly the most surprising thing they could do is like a character dies cut to black is to end the cut. I think is like they really can only get away with it once, but it's if you need to pull the rug from underneath the player, that is the number one way you do it in this game.
Don't you think they kind of did it already with the Thor fight? And the fake out death?
I think you can still do that because it's not like a full. It feels like it's in the flow of the game of like, okay, when not to spoil it, but like when you die, it is part of the flow that you see this screen and then you see the screen where you come back. So it feels like it is still, by the logic of the game, still kind of in the flow of like you go into menus all the time, right? But it's kind of expected. So it feels like that does not feel like a cut to some another look. It is not moving you somewhere else.
So Kyle and Suriel, you're in the camp that by the end of this game, they're going to have the big moment of just flash, cut, showing everybody like in their big send off, like end of a Fallout game or something.
No, I'm saying that like if they want to communicate something dire has happened, like if they're gonna go back to Atreus as a playable character, which it seems they are, like the number one way to shock people is to say like is to break those expectations that you have, specifically of like if he's the character that I'm following, then nothing bad can happen because the camera does have to flow. Is to say like we are cutting it off and switching to Kratos. I don't think it's gonna be a case where it's like they have a credit sequence like and this character goes on to do this and then cut like a bunch of cuts. Right. I think they can cut once, I think, and have it have a really large impact.
As long as they measure twice.
That's right.
I think that don't do that. I think Kratos' like dream sequences where they do environmental transitions really quickly. Yeah. I think there are tricks. There are tricks to not break their own rules while still. I don't think you can say this character is safe because they can't do a cut. You know what I mean? So the camera could move over to a rock and then back out from a rock that's very close to where somebody else is or something like, they can do anything.
I can progress like, hey, we're going to pan to this rock. And then when we pan back, it's like some time later. And then like some character has run by or whatever.
I could see it doing something like, if Atreus, and again, I don't know what happens. This is just a bold speculation. It's where I thought this game was going to go a lot quicker than it has, even if it doesn't get there. But I thought like Odin was going to kidnap Atreus. And so like that would be a tough thing to cut back and forth between unless like they're attaching it to like one of Odin's ravens and the camera's like flying down as kind of like a way to cheat it. But Victor Pham writes in and says, can you really call it a one-shot camera when the screen turns white each time you use a Mystic Gateway? There are at least 3 instances I could think of that broke the illusion of the no-cut camera.
Scorsese would never.
Absolutely. There's not one Mystic Gateway in any Scorsese movie. Prove me wrong. But it would break the illusion. I wonder why they pushed that so hard as a marketing bullet point. Yeah, I don't know if marketing bullet point is the best way to put it. It's just kind of, I'm still a little confused by it. We had a Twitter poll from MinnMax's Twitter account just to try and get a sense of where people were at with the no-cut camera. And you all want some poll results from Twitter?
Would love some.
Oh, I do.
Okay,
is it like or dislike?
So it's how important to you is the no-cut camera aspect of God of War Ragnarok. 26.7% said not important at all. 52.5% say it's okay, kind of cool. And then 20.7% say it's essential. So, majority of people are like, it's fine.
I think for one thing, it's like most of the one shots you see in a lot of other like in movies and film or like in TV shows are faked in some way. Like they will have like the one part where they cut to like they have to pan through a wall and then that'll be the break where they're like, okay, now we can reassess and do another take. So like in the sense of like, oh, this is like one achievement that we never broke, kind of like that we were able to do this. It's even more like of a fake because it's like they never had to have actors commit to a single take for that long, right? It's not like an achievement in like, look how long I can hold this note or something, but it's more about like, this is the kind of storytelling we're going to do where like the scope of we're going to try to make this, like the scope of this storytelling feel as large as possible while maintaining focus on this small set of characters, right? And like even something like we're gonna have Atreus go off and focus on him for a while feels like a little bit of a surprise in that you expected that the camera would be squarely on Kratos the entire time, and for it to shift to Atreus is like kind of a novel thing for them to do. Like, oh, like I think when I said, oh, okay, this is going to be a scene where Atreus and Sindri have this conversation, and then it'll pan back, and when it didn't, it's like, oh, okay, like we're gonna do this then now.
Right, yeah, for sure. It's surprising. Yeah, I remember Corey Barlog even talking at some point, I forget if it was during the studio visit or what, but when he joined Crystal Dynamics for a while and was working on a new Tomb Raider game. And one of those pitches was there was going to be the no-cut camera in that Tomb Raider game. So it just feels like this drum he was banging for a while. Like, this would be cool to do in a game. We can do it. Dead Space can't be the only people pulling this thing off. Manic Pixel writes in.
Sorry, just one thing, though. I don't think you can call it a marketing bullet point unless it's a marketing bullet point. if you can show me on the back of the box where it says 1 take, sure. But maybe they somebody asked them about it in an interview, but I don't feel like they're proudly just saying we're only 1 take, nobody else is. You know what I mean? I don't get that vibe from that at all. I do think it is a directional choice.
I do think it is something that, especially early on, they're pretty tight with the story for 2018 and Ragnarok, which I really appreciated in the press. I mean, we'll get more into that later, but I feel like they've kept this under wraps really well. I mean, I guess I didn't look at the leaks and whatnot, but from the official messaging standpoint. But it is something easy, I feel like, with God of War 2018 of all right, we're doing a round of interviews after the big reveal of God of War 2018. Here are things you can talk about. The no-cut camera. That was just, it feels a little bit like, and this sounds like I'm putting it down and I'm not, but it sounds a little bit like the accessibilities feature. Come on, press, do a feature on... Look how many cool accessibility options we have in this game. Isn't that cool? It's yeah, no doubt that's really cool. But I feel like from the press perspective, it's I feel like we could dig into something else other than just this cool aspect that has no real ramifications for the plot of the game in any way, that type of thing,
It is.
So you care more about a video game's plot than its accessibility features?
I'm sorry, I know there was no way to finish that sentence without seeming like a monster. So
we should call that out, though. I think it is really surprising and nice to see all of the options that you have even before you start the game of how do you want to modify this experience, which I think is really cool because you have everything from hey, you can just play it on Give Me God of War from the beginning, and if you want to have that hardcore gamer experience, you can. Or you can just not care about any of that stuff and modify the experience in all these different ways, which I think the kind of slippery thing about that is that you always, because it feels like they addressed so many individual complaints about that some random person might have and might need to play the game. There's always this kind of instinct of oh, they should do this as one of those features. Is that always have request more than you're given, which people should definitely do if they feel like it hinders them from playing the game. But it does feel like they hit a lot of those bullet points that people want from a game. Things as easy as hey, if you don't like the dodge button, you can just change it and have this kind of easy swap between circle and X, right?
Yeah.
Who did that, by the way?
I definitely did it.
I did it,
Me too.
and then
Really
I felt bad,
it.
and I was I think I'm going to play the game the way that they want me to do, and then I went back.
X for dodge is insane. Dodge roll with the X button is insane. I would never.
There have been a couple of times where I've gotten a big hit because I hit circle for dodge. And I'm why is this not the dodge button?
Did you end up swapping it, Jill?
Switch. It really is.
Maybe. I thought I would just try to, I thought I would just try to do the way that the developers saw it happening. And about all of the accessibility stuff too, not only is there a lot of options, and they're all across all fields, audio, visual, text, everything you could possibly want, but they call it out in the very beginning. It's when you're setting stuff up.
Before
so it's
the main
not
menu.
just
Yeah.
So it's not just oh, it's there and you can look for it. It's literally here it is for you, and I really like that.
Yeah, for sure. Forrest Knoll writes in and says, in the settings menu, I highly recommend going to accessibility, play style, and then setting auto pickup to full. Anytime you're near loot, health, or rage pickups, they will be automatically gathered, no input required. For me, it's made combat much better overall. That I also turned that on and then turned it off again because I don't know if I should. The idea of auto health just jumping to you. There's something kind of fun about trying to be strategic about when you go over there and stomp on the little health thing.
Yeah. So I have it to manually pick up health and automatically pick up resources.
Oh my god, you can do that? That's amazing.
Yeah, it's never gonna. I'm never gonna not pick up a thing strategically, resource strategically. But for health, it definitely feels like I want to have the option, even if most of the time, 99% of the time, it's the right call is to just heal whenever you can. But there is going to be that very sliver of okay, I'm at full health. I don't need to pick this up. I can go ahead and save this health pickup for later. Right. But yeah, it's stuff like that. I think is really cool. But then you start getting in that slope of well, why not just have you basically automatically absorb them instead of basically mashing the equivalent is just mashing the pickup button whenever you're near resources is what the game is doing versus just put them all in my inventory the moment they drop. Why even do that, right? So you always get into that slope of I just want more than what you're giving me.
So
right.
It's fun. It's fun to go to a little beacon of light and get something added to your inventory.
And oh, sorry.
No, I'm just the pop up. Just a fun little pop up. You love those.
And plus, when you pick up health, I didn't realize this until a couple of battles in. It kind of pushes back the enemies.
Yeah.
So there's a really nice strategy to picking up health, not only because I need health, but like I need you to get out of my face.
Yeah, so then for people that have the auto pickup then, like Suriel, like does it for Brock and Sindri's Forge, there's like the chest there, which I was confused about. What are these pieces that are jumping in here? But people are saying that's the stuff that you missed traveling around, that it automatically goes to their treasure chest. So is that chest always empty for you then, Suriel?
No, because it doesn't locate that stuff for you. It just, whenever something drops, you can pick it up. So it's like if you just happen to not see it at all or go near it, then that's the stuff that gets sent. Because I've definitely picked up stuff from that chest.
Okay, gotcha.
You can knock some enemies off ledges like a very cheesy
That's
ways.
a good point. Yeah, for sure. Dan Vallone talking about accessibility as well. He says, in the settings, I immediately changed repeated button presses to hold for QuickTime events. Does this make me a bad person who's unwilling to sacrifice his thumbs and wrists to the gaming gods? Am I spitting in the face of the developers because this isn't what they intended?
No, like they intended for you to be able to change that, right? Like I'm sure right. They have like, this is like the default settings. Like the default settings are like kind of like the ones that we kind of imagine most people are going to use. But if they allow you to change it, it's within, like, it's not like it's cheating or anything to have that hold button because people need it. And like the only reason that I do it is because I kind of like the kind of like I don't know what the opposite of ludonarrative dissonance, harmony. I don't know.
No one's ever talked about it working well. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if I want to, if like designers want me to feel as if I'm struggling as Kratos to push something back, right? I want to be matched and have that effort, but it's not like going to break the entire game if like, oh, I'm just holding it. Like there's like, I don't think I even failed a single one of those like QuickTime events. So it's not like it even matters. Like it may not even be a thing where it's like, you even can't fail it unless you really want to, but like it's like you're doing it for fun, and if you don't find it fun, then don't do it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Manic Pixel writes in over on Patreon to say, in the opening scene when Kratos stands up, the physics and motion on his beard are absolutely incredible. Just an example of the amazing small world detail and polish that make this game stand out so much. Yeah, great beard. Great beard. Yeah. They're really showing it off in the beginning. I got a little
distracted by it though. I'm not gonna lie, because it is moving, and that's like, you look at it, but then it's moving in a way that like beards actually don't really move.
It's like 10% floppier than I think you would expect an actual beard to
10% floppier.
Well, actually, if you check out the accessibility settings, they do have a beard floppiness slider, so it might be up your alley. You should check it out. Faraz Rizvi writes in, they say, is anyone else distracted by the back of Kratos' head? I'm playing on quality mode, and I just can't help but be drawn to look at the skin folding on the back of his bald head. The detail is amazing, but I find myself just looking at that in the quiet moments.
I do like that he assumes that is a quality exclusive feature of like the skin lines on the back of his head. Because I'm playing on performance and I see those too. It's not like we really got to master the ray tracing on this one if we want to see the folds on the back of Kratos' head.
And you can see the folds jiggle at 60 frames per second in performance. So yeah, I definitely recommend it.
This time floppier. Oh my gosh, where did we go with this, you guys?
Robert George, it's
a part of life though. Actually, I think it's actually interesting. Like, we're depicting these gods, right?
Yeah.
But they still got weird folds on the back of their bald heads. Like he's still got some grays in his beard. Like, he's still very human in his depiction. I think it's kind of interesting, actually.
Yeah, you think you take the blades and just try and pop out just those little gray hairs that are popping through at some point.
No, he's proud of those grays.
Okay, yeah.
Well, that actually kind of brings up like the idea of aging as a god, because it's like specifically for Kratos, it's kind of confusing because he's been a god and then been like sapped of his godly presence. Like he's kind of gone back and forth between being like a demigod and a human being. So it's like how old is he, and how old is his body? You know, like that is a question that I think like one of the like thousands of lines they wrote as like ambient dialogue could address, of like, how, like, is this like a Goku situation? Are you just like aging very slowly, or is it like, you know, where are you at? How do you feel, Kratos? What age do you feel?
Like one of the journal entries should just be him being like, by the way, it's my 300th birthday today. Thank you all for being here. Something like that would be nice. Robert George writes in and says, first game was about Kratos being a mystery to his son. I love how this game is flipping it, and Atreus is now the mystery to his father. Favorite moment so far is the first shot of Atreus, where he's walking into the cave, and he's carrying the deer, and Robert says that the antlers from the deer that he killed look like Loki's helmet. Which is one of those details.
I mean, that's Loki's helmet in, like, the MCU, right?
I think so, but, I mean, I wonder, going back to the Elder Edda and all that stuff if they do mention that Loki is wearing cool deer horns at some point? Or do you think that's all MCU? That's coming from somewhere.
Suppose so. I don't know if I remember any particular, but I could be totally off on that.
So do you think
there aren't a ton of popular depictions of Loki that I can recall outside of the MCU one? So there's not what do these things have in common, right?
Well, there's Dogma.
That is true.
That's just his name. It's not
like I can think of one old representation where Loki just kind of looks like a jester.
Right.
So he doesn't really have this armored presence.
So all right, Jill, are you going on a limb and calling Robert George a liar? Are you saying by the end of this game that there will not be a moment of Loki putting on a crown of antlers? Zero chance?
I think that'd be so cool.
But
I think more than anything, he's hauling in a big old buck because God of War 2018 begins with, hey, let's go hunt a deer. I don't know. You know what I mean? So it's like, look how much he's a man now. Right. He got his own deer.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really, really cool because they have a recap, and if you haven't played the first game, you kind of get an idea. But that first scene is sort of a recap for people who have played the first game of just here are where all the people are. So Kratos is now able to, he is grieving, he's going through that grieving process, whereas the first game he's very obviously trying not to think anything about that. And that's what that whole long, sad moment in the cave by himself is sort of doing. And then you get the same thing with Atreus coming up with a deer and being like, I'm becoming independent. I can hunt a deer and kill it on my own and provide for my family. And it continues on with just showing how both of them have kind of matured in the fact that Atreus is not fighting with his dad anymore. His dad says go saddle the wolves, and he does that without any sass or fight back. He doesn't fight with his dad. Of course, we see the haha, I've got a secret. But
I do the non-linear kind of nature of how people change, right? Of at first it seems he's putting his hand on his shoulder. There has been some clear evolution, but the thread of regression of as soon as that there is this major point of contention between them, that kind of old dynamic of my boy won't listen to me versus my dad won't let me do anything, resurfaces in a way that feels like you never really fully address all of your problems as a human being, and it is about that continual process of learning, of making sure that you are not just oh well, I've accomplished this thing, never worry about it again, that you are continually making the active effort to be more open with other people, things like that.
Yeah, so
and for a video game to have that kind of subtlety and nuance in a story and characterization is fantastic.
Right. He was kind of coming to terms with and understanding his son from that 2018 game. Then it turns out kids change, and he's still struggling to try and keep up with that. It's those moments of him saying well, I'll get the deer. Oh wait, no, I guess you've already got it. You already impaled it on that tree ahead of me and all that stuff. It's really fun to see. And then Atreus, meanwhile, is screaming stuff whatever Loki's supposed to be doing, he's not doing it here. Because it's interesting how you bounce back and forth even already. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of this in the game, bouncing back and forth between Atreus has a good point. Actually, Kratos has a good point. But it is that thing of what do you want to do, Kratos? You just want to stay here and train nonstop for when the gods come? But it is just a little bit of that helicopter dad, Finding Nemo dad situation, right? Of just at some point we have to go out and let this kid live his life. And if his life is just craving to take on all the gods, what are you going to do, I guess?
It is what Vegeta and Goku would do with their children. You're coming in the hyperbolic time chamber with me. We're going to train for years of your life perceptually.
Right.
And those kids are just into it. That's Trunks being okay, Dad, let's just train for a year. It's they're into it. But yeah, that's the DBZ mentality. We're going to stay and train until you're ready.
Right. So if Trunks...
The difference is that Goku would definitely be yeah, let's go fight all those gods. I want to get stronger. Instead of doing anything sticking back, staying back.
And then Gohan would try and stop him, saying, no, we actually need to think this out and train a little bit more. But yeah, you're totally right. Trunks, I think if his dog died, he wouldn't have a problem going in the hyperbolic time chamber that day and just endlessly train as well. And then he gets
a question, actually.
Yeah.
Now that we know a soul is 4 parts, right. when that wolf did die, were there 4 little sparkles coming out, or was it 3?
Oh God, that's good.
Heck. Oh, that is a good question.
It feels like it could have been 4. It felt in my vague memory.
Check the tape.
Yeah,
my memory was 3, but then later on they're like talk about that stuff in particular, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right. Because even like further on, they mention like you cast some sort of spell on that wolf or something like that.
Right. Yeah, Boondock Bandit wrote about it, saying the most interesting part of the game for me for the first chunk was Atreus not realizing or seeing the magic spell he did when Fenrir died. When Kratos brought it up and Atreus didn't know, it surprised me. It could be he wasn't paying attention, but it could be that Kratos sees things that Atreus cannot. I was really intrigued by that too. What do y'all make of it? Like, Jill, what do you think about that idea that Atreus wasn't aware that he was doing a little magic there? Because like I went back and played the opening again today, and I looked up the translation because he just kept saying like Safna, Safna, as Fenrir the wolf was dying, and I was like, oh, is this part of the spell or something? It turns out that's Icelandic for sleep. So he's just telling his dog to go to sleep, which yes is sad. We will be talking about that as well. But what do you make about the magic spell part of it, Jill?
Took it in the way of like later when he turns into the bear, like it's a same sort of symptom of like he is experiencing something that he cannot control, and something just comes of that, which he didn't know because he's still, which I think is really cool. He's still figuring out what his powers are, even though like he should have gone back and read some of the myths, or he would know that he's got a lot of affinity for animals and changing into animals, and that might happen. But so yeah, I really love this idea that he is at the stage of like, I have no idea what I could do.
Yeah.
And I found it really interesting that everybody in the story just kind of like blew that off. But Kratos saw some kind of magic happen, and everyone's like, nah, we don't think that happened. I'm like, something happened.
Well, yeah, because Mimir just says like, oh, some trick of Fimbulwinter, some nonsense with Fimbulwinter, moving on quickly. Where it's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. But
Like,
yeah.
what? Like, here's a god that doesn't know what his powers are, and Kratos, who's not given to like tricks of the eye, sees something happen. Like, come on, let's dive into this.
So is Fenrir one of the 2 wolves you need to get the moon back, get the sun back?
No.
Fenrir though shows up. Close your ears, Hanson.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Just don't do it.
Okay.
We
But
don't need to.
Fenrir is a mythological
Is a
important wolf.
mythologically important, very important for Ragnarok.
So we
Right.
cannot be done. Like, we're going to go find those 4 parts of the soul at some point.
That feels right. Though I think those parts were going somewhere.
Okay.
It seems like it's going to be relevant again in some way, yeah. But so that whole aspect that comes up again and again throughout this opening chunk of Atreus being like, I just want to, maybe we can go to Tyr, ask him about Loki. I just want to know if anybody knows about Loki. Did you all take that as like maybe I'm named after something, or is it the best part of the mythology of this game of, you know, time being a little bit flexible, being the full circle? You don't know if you're looking forward, looking to the past. Is that what he's talking about? Is like, we need to ask people about Loki to figure out what I'm going to be doing in the future because people might know? Does that question make sense?
If there's cave paintings on a wall,
Right.
that has pictures of me,
Right.
but my name is Loki, and like only giants and people who are friends with giants know it,
Yeah.
I would feel equally motivated to be like, hey, what's Loki?
Right.
What are you talking about? You know? So I think that's 100% one-to-one logical.
It's just the part and parcel of the nature of time in this universe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also kind of vague. Like how much do people know about the concept of Loki if Atreus is supposed to be Loki? It feels a little bit weird of how much of it is like prophecies, you know, mention Loki and you're supposed to be our cousin, but we've never met you because this is you, right? Like, or was there like a previous incarnation of Loki or something like that?
Right. And most of the people that he talks to have no idea what this Loki figure even is. And are they telling the truth, or like what's going on there?
Did you believe Freya when she didn't seem to know the name Loki?
Not entirely. Like, she seemed a little sus to me.
There's a lot going on with her that seems a little sus, yeah.
What's interesting about her is like she does have clear reactions to some things and didn't seem to have a clear reaction to Loki.
Yeah, she could be.
So when she's like, Odin's here, you know what I mean? Like that really threw her back, whereas she could have been cool the whole entire time, but like she was really thrown by some things.
Yeah. Real quick before we leave the Fenrir stuff too much in the rearview window here, Matthew Wilkes right in says, I was waiting for this. Thank you. We're here for you, Matthew. I want to say I've never cried playing a game before. Not once. Until Friday night when that freaking scene with Atreus saying goodbye to Fenrir got me. A lot
so
of people.
early too.
Yep.
Yeah.
a lot of people wrote in with that. A lot of people had a very tough time with that scene in particular. Oof. How'd you all do?
It's a good thing. Like it's what we've been talking about with this pacing too, of like you start off with like the introspective, emotional, long scene, and then you have this racing, like chase scene, and then you slow down again, and then they just shoot you in the heart. This was a really like, and it also, I love how they are using everything like multi-layered, because not only does this tell a lot of story and like the mythological thing about Fenrir and whatever's going on with his magic, and we're not really sure, but it's also one of those tricks that's like as old as storytelling, that you have a character that a dog or an animal of some sort has a deep love and connection with, to show that this is a good character.
Right.
So you feel very bad and like are drawn into Atreus as a character, and you're like, this is a good person, which kind of worries me, because when that happens, they tend to like to mess with your perceptions of things. So like I immediately was like, oh no, is Atreus gonna like break my heart here and become something I can't be behind?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's where a lot of people thought this game was going to be going at the end of 2018. I think the overly simplistic read at the end of 2018's God of War is like, oh, well, I guess he's Loki. He's going to be the bad guy. Moving on.
He is, quote unquote, the bad guy from the perception of the gods.
Right. Right. But we're not exactly on Odin's side. So what exactly does that mean?
But all the myths are written by the gods.
Right.
God perspective.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that by the end of this game, he's going to be full, quote unquote, villain, even from our perspective?
I'm worried about it, but
No.
Yeah.
Don't even worry about it.
Okay.
Well, I think there will be some point of like contention, because I think a lot of the themes of this, like this kind of subseries of the God of War series, is like the idea of justifiable, like opposition, right? Of like where a lot of it, like one of the strengths of 2018 was that like you can kind of see where every character was coming from, even as you kind of well, that's probably a little messed up. You probably shouldn't have done that, but I can kind of see why. Like the idea is understanding. Is almost inverting mythology by saying like every character in something like Greek or Norse mythology has these like very simplistic motivations that are kind of unfurled and become complicated by other plot points. But it's like my whole purpose as a character is to embody this emotion. And it's uncomplicated, right? Whereas like what they're trying to do here is to complicate a lot of those motives and say like, well, like this is a way we can contextualize a lot of the same actions that happened in myth, but kind of say like, well, here's why they would have done that, or like, you know, what kind of a character would do something like that, and complicate and deepen those bonds and like those kinds of conflicts. So I think that like it wouldn't necessarily, like the version of Loki that I think that ends up being like quote unquote bad guy, I think even then is like we may not see him as the bad guy, even though like if you look at his actions from like the like, well, this character did this and this, and you would say like, well, that's probably pretty messed up, but then you kind of come to see like, well, he had his reasons, right? Is kind of the whole arc of this series.
Yeah,
I think too, some of what's backing up my fear of this is like the thematical thread through a lot of this is like repeating the sins of the father sort of thing, and like that's what Kratos is so worried about. So like you go back into like the original God of War series, like even at the end where like Kratos is justified in his anger against the gods, like he's up there just like murdering, you know? He like at the point where you're like, I understand what you're doing, but you're destroying the entire world and I'm not behind you with this anymore. Like we could be seeing that history kind of repeat itself in Atreus / Loki, and that's sort of what Kratos is trying to avert, but perhaps won't be able to, and I would find that a very interesting narrative thread.
Yeah. Sean Mills had a quote from the game that I really enjoyed that relates a little bit to that, where he says, I love the return of the ambient dialogue in the game when you walk around, and it feels like there's a lot more of it this time. I especially like the one exchange where Atreus asks if it's moral to kill someone who's trying to kill you. Kratos just responds with, yes. And then Mimir comments, well, there you have it, lad. Just really quickly. Brett Norton says, how is a God of War game so funny? It's gotten more laughs out of me than nearly any other game I've played recently. Like when Mimir says, "Brother, a thought. What if we took a stealthy approach to our next fight?" And then Kratos just says, "No." I mean, you don't need much from Kratos to really have a good punchline ready to go there. Or
I do not need a snack.
Yes, exactly. A lot of people wrote in about that. Does not need the snack thing. Or like first time you pop the L3 and R3 Spartan Rage thing in the bear fight, and the Mimir just goes, "Oh, now you've done it, bear." Just those little moments are very good.
For me, it was you're like rotating a giant wheel, right?
Yeah.
And Atreus says, "Oh, it's pretty cool. You stopped at exactly where we needed to travel through."
Yes.
Yes.
I was like, okay. So they're making Atreus / Loki like sarcastic and funny in this game. Like one thing I'm impressed by is he's developing a sense of humor that you don't see in any other characters, and so I think it's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, Sindri and Brock certainly are kind of the comic relief, especially Sindri. But yeah, they're definitely playing that up with him. Joe Halaska writes in and says, "What do y'all think about the quasi fourth wall breaking humor in the writing? There's several examples of this." Yeah, but they bring up that exact one of, "Oh, nice job getting it to lower exactly where we need it." Does it work for everybody? Does it seem like a bit much?
I like it in the context of like that's like Loki seems like the person who would have that kind of wit of.
He's the Deadpool of the Norse mythology. I think we're all thinking it.
That's what they always say.
It's close to fourth wall, but it's not. If somebody did that in real life, you'd be like, "Oh, nice job casually just lowering that exactly where you need." You know what I mean? Like
Right.
It still works in universe where I wouldn't quite call that a Deadpool move.
Yeah.
There's a couple, like I think when it's utilitarian is actually when it's most kind of jarring. With there's like you later on in the dwarf realm you encounter those kind of spouts of air that you can't do anything with.
Yeah.
And like he specifically calls that out. "Oh, we need some special equipment to come back. Like we'll have to come back here later." Like, and that part of it is like, oh, I mean, like I guess it could be jokey in game, but it's definitely like the game like giving you a flashing like, yeah, that you noticed. Like come back to this later, right? And so those feel like the most kind of jarring, but I think for the most part they do a pretty good job of making sure that stuff feels in world and that like the right character is the person to say it, so it doesn't feel like every character has the same sense of humor.
Yeah, there was one moment in kind of the, if you want to call it fourth wall breaky, I guess there's other stuff we can get to as well. But there's one moment where it stood out for me where it was like reading a wall in the mines, and like the description just said something like, it's like, what else?
Yeah.
What else can be said? It's just a lookout. It's just what they call this thing. Whereas basically, like the text for the official entry was just like, "What do you want from me? I'm just a writer." It's like the only time where it's kind of like, I don't know. It's a little jarring for that moment.
There are also like the Kasavir or Kvasir
Yes.
prophecies, which are the most gamey thing, but it's like, I guess it makes sense, but it's like I'm kind of not sure where I stand on those. Of like, it's a little bit cheeky. It's like the cheekiest thing they do, but
Yes.
like, is it like I'm willing to give them a pass, but it's kind of like you're on thin ice with this stuff.
Yeah, so Nick Olson wrote in about that. Kvasir's poems are such a fun collectible. I'll never get tired of reading descriptions of iconic Sony franchises in the Nordic prose. The best one yet. That's what they are, Kyle. Yeah.
Okay, I saw a poem and my eyes glossed over. I did not read a second one.
You should do it. You should do it.
Oh my God, they're okay.
Okay.
All right,
okay.
all right,
This is basically Trivia Tower All Stars Part 2 here. So Nick says the best one has to be the one that is called Large Society Ground Orb: The Performance. What Sony franchise is that referring to?
MLB The Show.
Wow, way to go, man. Jesus, that was fast. I was stumped looking at that for a while.
So the poems are fun, actually.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You got to understand, I can't stomach poetry because it's like it's hard for me, like how non-literal it can be.
Right.
But so if it's a fun little like riddle, okay, all right. I'll look
You
at
should
my
go
poems.
back to it.
I think I sold them all, but they stay in your inventory.
Yeah,
They promised me. That's the thing is this game, it assures you at any possible step. It's like, you want to sell these poems, just so you know they're going to stay in your inventory if you sell them. You're like, okay, cool.
Yep, don't worry about it. It is a very reassuring game. I feel like, yeah, even in your last delayed input video, you talked about that, how this game has got your back. It's going to walk you through this. It wants you to succeed at all points, and that's definitely coming through in a big way.
Yeah.
Keenan Harrell writes in and says, "Hey, what's the deal with characters solving all the puzzles for you? They speak up way too early. I'm either one step away from the solution or in the process of solving it when some character just blurts out the answer. With all the accessibility options, they should patch in an option just to turn the puzzle hints off."
It's there, bro. It's there.
Yeah, there's one.
You can set puzzle timing to extended plus, I think.
Oh,
and that
really?
Effectively turns that effectively turns them off.
Oh,
I mean, there's also off too.
Oh, wow.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I wonder if they added that option or just learned the lesson a little bit more after, especially Horizon Forbidden West. It feels like that was one of the main critiques when that game came out. Is like, she just needs to cool it on the hints and talking just a little bit. So it's nice they really worked it in here.
And also with a lot of hints too. It's like, yeah, no, duh, it has to do with this water geyser. I got that. I don't know how to get to the stupid water geyser.
Yes, exactly. Mimir just comes to me like, how about you just look around a little bit more? It's like, I'm trying, Mimir. I'm trying, buddy. Just blink in the right direction. Omri Kernet writes in and says, I don't remember the extent this happened in the 2018 game, but I love the diegetic hints Atreus gives us throughout, like letting you know when an optional island has been 100% completed, or that he sees something you can interact with / can't do yet. I'm curious if he does this less on higher difficulties. I don't know. I doubt it. I wonder if that's
I think that is all just like that puzzle timing of like how much Atreus is effectively helping you beat the game.
Yeah,
I think is like its own individual setting.
It's so nice. It's like, with the Resident Evil remakes, when just having the map color change when a room has been 100%ed, it's like, okay, thank you. I really deeply appreciate this. Forrest Lastman writes in and says, so far all the puzzles, almost all the puzzles have just been find the thingy challenges. The difficulty is mostly just looking around an area to find something to interact with instead of working out some logic puzzle or something. These are still good for the most part, but it's starting to feel a little bit one note.
Find the thingy. You know what? I think that's a fair criticism. The one I think is maybe kind of interesting is in your cave, you're like lowering water onto the gears and like stopping it here and then stopping it there.
Right.
But you're right. It's not really playing around too much with the physics or really failing too much. It is really just find the thingy.
Yeah, it's like I think it is in line with the rest of this game outside of maybe combat, where it just feels very frictionless, where they just kind of want you to have like they want you to get the dopamine of like, oh, there's a chest I can't see, but then it's like immediately you just go around the corner and then that's how you get it. It's like that is a lot of this game is like there will be a thing in the distance that you want, and it's like the process of getting it is like a lot simpler than you would expect of like, oh, you just look around the right corner and you can get the thing. So like it feels in line with that, where they kind of just want you to have like the reward parts of your brain get rewarded without necessarily doing a ton of work. That said, we are still pretty early, and I think a lot of the main path stuff is probably going to be the simplest stuff, where, like I said earlier, it doesn't feel like I'm getting into like a lot of the optional stuff. So I'm hoping that like once the game opens up and you can go to more places, that they will kind of crank up the difficulty and some of that stuff, because some of the best stuff in the 2018 game was like the most hidden out of the way stuff.
Yeah. Luke Larson writes in and says, I never want to see another water wheel again. That's fair. Look, that's fair.
Yeah,
it's good, easy puzzling.
This section, I think, was just like diverting water in the right way.
But even like
which feels very un-Kratos-like, of just you're a god. Just jump over this entire puzzle. Why aren't you just doing like, why am I climbing over stuff when I'm a god?
Yep.
Right. I did a couple of I did the side quest thing where you kill all of the smokestacks.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of my biggest like detractors for this particular game is I wasn't doing anything because I'm like, oh, I need to go do this and then I can get to here. I was literally like, I'll just follow the path, and then there's a thing. I'm like, I guess I have to do something with the thing. And then, oh, that opened the door. It wasn't because I was like, I'm working out on my own how to open the door. I'm literally just like, I'm here. I push the thing that's colored yellow or whatever it's highlighted in some way.
It's a lot of like, here's a locked door with the combination right next to it is basically what a lot of these puzzles come down to, where it's like there's like one puzzle where it's like, oh, you have to light the 3 torches to open this chest, and one of them is being drowned into like a water wheel, so you have to divert it. But like that felt like the most intricate they do with that stuff, where it's like mostly if you look around, if you do a quick 360, like you'll find all 3 of the things you need to hit. So it's like a lot of these puzzles don't feel like puzzles at all, really. They're just kind of like they're just kind of busy work more so than like puzzles.
Brendan Murphy writes it and says, okay, I feel like I'm going crazy. It's happened twice now. Atreus has said, hey, did you see that? And I saw absolutely nothing. Do we think Atreus is seeing things Kratos can't, or am I just blind? This happened in the boat on the way to the dwarf village and shortly after entering the mines when looking for Tyr. Somebody else had it? Somebody replied to that comment, be like, this same thing happened to me as well. He keeps yelling that. I don't know what I'm missing.
Yeah, that definitely feels like they were trying to give me a hint, but I just was not grok. Like I was not looking in the right direction that from wherever they triggered.
You can resort grok
On the boat,
here.
I think it was a creature that you end up fighting, like the spitters, like the bunch of like the lizardy spitters. But I think that I also missed the one in the cave because I'm looking around. Because actually, going back to one question, I think Find the Thing is actually kind of interesting in this game in that it's not highlighted. You don't just like press the D-pad and like everything that is important turns yellow. You know what I mean? Like it is at least like it is kind of fun. I enjoy searching around these environments. And I think, that's what I was doing when he says, "Do you see that?" It was obviously like most people don't even touch the right analog stick. I think most players are not when they're like just walking around, just allowing the camera to do what it does. And I think that's what we missed.
Yeah. Jake Tricks, by the way, writes in and says, I don't think this specifically applies to God of War, but are any of you tilting the joystick just enough to walk through the environments? I find it to be more immersive if I'm just taking my time to appreciate the visuals and pay close attention to everything in the dialogue. I get it.
I don't have the restraint to do that constantly, so for me it's a lot of like, okay, if it looks like I'm about to, like I sprint everywhere, and if it looks like I'm about to enter a thing that'll cut off the dialogue, I just stop moving until the dialogue is over, and then I continue running.
Yeah. When I'm in like the boat and there's like a fun story or something happening, and I'm like, oh, but the shore's right there. I guess I have to circle.
Yeah, and I get thank God it has that system of like, as I was saying, and it's pretty good at picking up those themes, but I am so weird with this game. I don't want those interruptions to even happen because I feel like it's not exactly how they were intending it. So like I'm really trying to make sure I'm going slow enough to have everything spaced out. So even if it's like, two narrative threads butted up against each other, there's still enough of a gap so it feels natural-ish in here.
I will say in that dwarven village, I took time to smash everything.
Oh,
really excellent smashables in that village. The pumpkins smash beautifully. The cheese actually slices.
Oh, man.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff to just kind of hit with your blades and your axe. I highly recommend it.
Were the dwarves all looking out of their windows, just horrified what was happening?
Well, they have no windows. They really shuttered down.
Yeah, it's very...
Can I ask a question, too, about, now that you've just brought that up? Are you guys mostly using the axe or the blades?
Blades.
I'm blades.
I'm mixing up. I feel like I'm like as someone who just like came off like a bunch of Devil May Cry games, I just do it as like a natural reaction of like you do one kind of basic combo with a weapon, then you switch to the next one, or like there are times that they specifically will prompt you by like, hey, these enemies have frost armor, so just use the blades to kind of get rid of that, and then you can switch to the axe or whatever. But I kind of find a little bit of use of them, but like I've been trying to actively mix it up, but I think if I were just following the game, I would probably use the blades because the blade, like, there's no intrinsic benefit to using the axe on some enemies other than like, hey, you can do frost damage or whatever. But like
out of combat when you're just running around, what is
I unequip everything. I walk around with bare arms basically. I put the axe back on in its slot.
Nice.
That is cool. Yeah, way to go, man. Brandon Scott writes in and says, did you all notice the dialogue from Amir that it's unfortunate that Fimbulwinter made us lose all of the magic and abilities we learned before? It's a bit of a silly explanation for a very video gamey thing of having to restart progress even for direct sequels. I missed when Amir said that. Does anybody else remember?
No, it's hard to know how much of the dialogue in this game because it's like part of this like pool there was like an Axios explainer where they talked to one of the designers behind it, where it just feels like they have this giant pool of like ambient dialogue that they can kind of deliver, and there's like logic between like, well, don't give them this thing if they haven't heard this other one. So a lot of it is kind of dispersed randomly depending on where the game sees gaps of like, okay, you just cleared this encounter, though there's probably enough downtime for you to get some dialogue here, and so we'll feed you one of those lines. But like where and when people hear different lines of dialogue is heavily dependent on like just some degree of randomness mixed with a logic of where you are and context. So it's definitely possible that none of us have been fed that line.
Yeah.
I did catch one for the armors, where it's just like, hey, what happened to armor we gave you? And it's like, it wore out. It's like, fine, that's enough for me.
Yeah,
that's good.
I'm surprised that maybe I'm just not looking in the right places. But I thought there'd be some more people that are a little upset about losing everything from the last game. Are gamers just this smart that we realize like, well, it's a better game if we get to build up again from nothing?
Yeah, I mean, like I feel like they give you the biggie, which is like if you had to go get the Blades of Chaos again,
right?
And like
right.
You start off with just the axe, but it's like the idea is like, well, I don't need my blades wherever I go, so I'm just kind of off on this one expedition with the axe, and then you come back and eventually you do get the blades again. So I think if they had made you say like, Odin took my blades, then I think people would have been that I think would have pissed people off, but I think everything else is like, like there's no like the skill points are like arbitrary logic nonsense, whatever. It's fine if we have to reallocate them again.
Yeah. Crab Palace writes in and says, I love the direction they took with progressing the combat. We have to unlock some of the moves from the previous game, but they're slightly different. The charged up R2 with the axe now throws enemies, and we can launch towards enemies with the blades, and we can charge up the weapons by holding triangle. It's the perfect balance between familiar and fresh. Yeah, nothing better than holding the blades with the triangle and just doing that chain swing. Such a cool, cocky move.
I do like that. Yeah, you can upgrade that to reflect projectiles, which is a
cool
really? Bonus of that. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great.
Quick question. Was the ability, so like blades can do extra damage, fire damage can do extra damage to frozen enemies, ice can do extra damage to burned enemies. Was that in the first game too?
I don't think so.
I mean, if it was less explicit, because there's definitely like in midway through God of War, they introduced like, hey, you have the Blades of Chaos. These enemies are frosted, so like hitting them with the axe isn't going to do much. So you want to use them. But now I'm not sure if they like just said like you just straight up cannot do damage to these enemies because they're frozen, or if they just made the bar that says like, hey, hit them with the blades more explicit by saying it's just like a protective shield, right? Like how much of it is like a UI change versus a systemic change? But there was some of that kind of like elemental affinity stuff in the first game.
If you had any real agency over that, I don't think that you could attack someone with the blades, make them catch on fire, and then attack with the axe.
Yeah, I think that stuff is new. Like
I think that's cool. I think that's a cool incentivization to switch up too.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we since we're playing the elements maybe a little bit more, do we all feel like we're gonna get some sort of wind item, and that's gonna be for those weird gusts of wind coming out of the poles, and then probably Mjolnir is gonna be the lightning one? Is that where we're going here?
Hell yeah. We're taking that hammer.
Yeah.
I would love to have Mjolnir. I don't think it's gonna happen.
Really?
Yeah.
It's right there. It's too easy.
Yeah, but mythologically it goes to elsewhere.
Here we go. Calling all nerds. Jill Grote is on
also,
the podcast.
Speaking of nerds stuff, the village, the dwarf village that you go to, which the name I'm not gonna try to say, and the dwarf that you are looking for, in the MCU is the place where Thor gets his axe. And that dwarf is played by Peter Dinklage.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You're welcome, everyone.
There we go.
The one who runs the guild shop in this game?
Yeah.
With a mini Kraken?
Durlin,
cool.
I want to say.
I
didn't put it together that was a baby Kraken until Kratos said it. Yeah. I was like, why does this just have an octopus? That's weird.
And its name is like, it looks like dinner, but it's not quite pronounced dinner for the name of the octopus. And it gives...
I 100% want it to be dinner.
I don't think the thing with the weapons is I don't think you will get any more than one more weapon, because I don't know what up on the D-pad does. I don't think I used it much, but you already have 3 of your D-pad directions accounted for. There's really only room for one more.
That's good logic.
And I can see the wind one being your blades now have a special wind, there's like a wind thing on them now versus it being its own weapon.
Right.
Or we've upgraded the blades to break wind types or whatever the things are.
Yeah. Darkfish Days says, so far my favorite attack has been Kratos' Glacial Rake. It looks so badass to drag the axe through the ground, and the wave of ice hitting multiple enemies feels as good as a runic attack without any cooldown. It is good. And I love how he turns away from them as it's building up, and then just kicks the ice right in their eyes. I'm
a big fan of whipping the chain and having seeing the ball of flame follow the chains and then explode on enemies. I do that a lot.
Colin Lambrecht says, I love that Santa Monica included multiple unique kill animations for each enemy with both weapons. My favorite has to be the reeling in the little wretch lizards with an R1 from the blades and Kratos just detonating the lizard in his fist as an automatic insta-kill. Incredibly satisfying.
That's so cool. That's fun.
It's so good. Yeah, I was a little bit annoyed by those guys, just the amount of the little enemies running around, and people on Twitch were like, oh, just that's what Atreus is for. Just have them shoot those little guys with the arrows, and that makes it so much better. Just to spam square every time you see those things.
Are you streaming
up.
this?
Streaming a couple chunks, like 2 sessions of it, not the entire thing.
Gotcha.
How are you streaming it? How are you streaming it?
Trying to apply privately for this. You know.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Wait, hang on.
What?
He's playing it right now as we speak.
So would you have streamed this on your channel if not for the Deepest Dive?
Oh, no, we had a long conversation about it before you even invited me onto this podcast.
Yeah.
Is that like a lot of people are like, I don't want to be spoiled by watching a streamer play this game.
Right.
This game in particular. They're like, I'll watch you play Sonic, but I'm not there for Ragnarok.
Okay, good. I'm glad we weren't holding you back. Yeah, I mean,
No, not at all.
I haven't streamed any parts with Atreus, but I'm very scared of that. I'm very scared of that thumbnail popping up. Like, I even saw some folks being fast and loose on Twitter with sharing clips. Like, oh, look at this funny clip with Atreus with the chest. It's like, what are you doing? Like, that automatic unfollow on
that's
Twitter.
Rotten, man.
Like,
that's so rotten. That removes the entire context of why that's okay.
Yeah,
that's
I know.
upsetting.
And not to dive into that fully, but I think everyone handled it well. But the other week on the MinnMax Show podcast, we went from talking about God of War, and it was like Janet and Kyle and Jacob Geller on there. And we were extremely spoiler-free. Like, I hadn't played any yet, obviously. So it was all spoiler-free and good. And then we went right from that to talking about Bayonetta. And my first volley talking about Bayonetta was like, what game has ever been improved by having multiple playable characters? And I went back because I noticed Janet gave a strange face. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, God of War. I know what's going on. And then after that, I went back and watched it again. Like, everyone check out Janet's poker face because it ain't great on the podcast when I'm screaming about that.
By the way, the answer to that is Devil May Cry 4 because I think Nero is a wonderful addition to that game. I think there's an argument to be made that he redefined action games, and also I like him better in 5 more than Dante.
All right, there we go.
Have at it, people on the internet.
Redefined is the word you use, though.
I think the grapple was huge. Like the reeling in enemies and pushing them away. That stuff, I think, like a lot of action games copy that whole cloth.
Sure.
Like DMC, Devil May Cry.
Sure. Yeah.
Hilton Durham writes in. Hillary Rodham Clinton writes in and says, have any of y'all found anything you missed or that's been changed from the 2018 game that you like or don't like? For me, it's the seemingly less focus on the fist combat with the skill tree being gone. I miss it. Also, the sound the axe makes when Kratos catches it now just doesn't sound right. Oh, Hilton. I'm sorry.
I use the shield a lot actually because it's like the easiest way to get stun. And I think if you combine like the arrow stuff from Atreus and Kratos, like it's been pretty helpful with bosses. Of like if I want to get the stagger up immediately, I can use the shield and Atreus arrows to get like this huge burst of like stagger meter basically, which is what all the bosses have. And then if I need to get that extra mileage, and I can maybe try to use the Spartan Rage and try to finish them off and then get that extra damaged. But yeah, it is kind of interesting that you don't get to kind of evolve that play style of like this is, and maybe that's how they balance it, right? It's like the shield and the fists are like the stun thing, and that's their utility versus like we want you to use the weapons more. We don't want you punching people too often.
Yeah.
Quick question though. So like how valuable is stagger are you finding in boss fights? Because I feel like it lasts for maybe, like 2 seconds. I get like 1 combo and then they're unstaggered.
You can't. I mean, if they hit you, like you basically have to start over. So it is more of like it's a kind of a high risk one because it's like if you get a lot of hits in a row without getting hit, then you can fill that bar up pretty quickly. But if you get hit once, you're basically back down. And I'm pretty sure the fists do less damage than other weapons. So you're kind of taking a bit of a risk by going shield heavy. But I think that's kind of like that's that play style is like high risk, high reward. So like when they give you the option of separate shields, I went for the parry shield because that one gives you a ton of stagger, but you have to be pretty like cognizant of when you should parry and when you should avoid attacks. So it's like that's kind of how I've been playing the game. But yeah, it's kind of you have to make a conscious choice to play differently if you go that route.
Yeah. Philly Eatsteak says, "Hey, this game is freaking hard. I'm getting my butt kicked on normal. I don't remember struggling this much in the previous game."
I found it really funny that like during the big fights, like the fight with Thor, I was like blowing through it like nothing, and then like all the kind of like mini bosses are the ones that like destroy me immediately. And I'm like,
yeah, the first kind of wall that I hit, a soft wall, but it was a wall nonetheless, was just like in Svartalheim, just one of those big turds that pops out the little wretches. Just like one of those guys, I think it was maybe the first or second one of those that you encountered. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm dying multiple times to this thing. I didn't see it coming.
That is been the weird surprise of just like it feels like there's something off about like how the game gives you feedback for taking damage, because it feels like whenever I'm like, if I get hit like enough times, I'm like, oh, suddenly I'm in danger, versus like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm at half health, I should really keep up, and or whatever. It's like it feels like you're either I'm totally blowing through this, or oh, I didn't realize I'm dead. Like is where the combat is. And yeah, those mini, like the Drake, I remember gave me like the kind of giant lizard boss gave me some trouble, and the bear actually, like the bigger, more momentous fights, I feel like they almost toned out because we don't want you to like struggle through these. Like the Thor one is like feels more like an interactive cutscene than a fight, but like some of those bosses can feel like definitely like their patterns are pretty simple, but if you fail them enough times, you are going to get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
The bear kicked my butt too, but I think like that's good. Getting beaten in these fights makes you care about upgrading your stats, your defense, and your weapons more. And so like, I think it's a good thing that, you know, the person asking the question feels like challenged and is getting beaten. Because that makes you more invested in caring about your loot and your gear.
Yeah.
There is also just, I think if it forces you to keep up with that stuff of like, if you're not like a level 3 enemy when you're level 2 is like a kind of like sit up and pay attention kind of fight, no matter like where they're at. And there's like a couple of optional bosses that definitely do that as well. So you definitely you are basically forced to keep up with the level curve of the game by like upgrading stats and caring about resources.
Right.
Yeah, Mitch maxed right
Sort of
in.
what we were saying earlier, like if it's not fun, there are 5 difficulty settings in this game.
Yeah.
And there is no point to not having fun. So choose a different level if you want to.
I bumped mine down a notch. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm bad at stylish action
I feel like
games.
There's enough other aspects to this game, and like it like, you know, there's like the exploration, the story, like the little kind of like the puzzles that we talked about earlier. There's so many other reasons to come to this game that it's like I would not be surprised if I ended up bumping down the difficulty, just because like I just want to get through this. Like so I definitely feel like this of all action games feels like the one to just play it however you like. Don't worry about the whole like, oh, you're not good enough at this game to like really enjoy it or get the most out of it. Just like Sony wants you to just play this game as much as possible, right? So just do it however you can.
It falls in that camp, and I remember Tim Turi back at Game Informer always had this stance of like, if it makes sense in the narrative of the game, like you are Kratos, like you should feel a little bit overpowered going through most of this game. Like, you know, Call of Duty game, you want to feel like the superstar action soldier, like no harm done. Whereas like stuff like The Last of Us, like if you're gonna err direction, I think it makes more sense to err on making it a little more challenging, right? But yeah, Mitch maxed right in and says the regular, not the story set piece boss fights are legit. Each one has been unique and challenging in a different way, and I hope that keeps up. That was definitely a weakness of the first game. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned just the variety there already, and like, the centaur boss and all that stuff. Like, they're really packing in a lot already.
Really enjoyed
like the alligator a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, very fun. I really enjoyed that they kind of played a joke with the troll.
Yes.
That did show up, and they're just like, no, it's dead. You're not even gonna fight it.
Because so they trolled us. Yeah, there's also like the weird ape thing that was like the corpse was like lying dead on the side. But yeah, that after that train sequence, Steve Bellegarde and a bunch of other people wrote in about that moment of when the giant troll grabs Kratos and then immediately it's like, nope, I'm just gonna chop off his head. We're not gonna deal with this. Like that was such a good twist.
That's a very grasshopper manufacturer thing of like,
we're
gonna build up this one enemy or like this encounter. And it's like, okay, here's the big bad, and then like something happens and you get to effectively skip a boss fight.
But I love that it's also, it's like commenting on the last game and the fact that you fought so many of those guys and all that stuff. Like it made me think of, I remember Randy Pitchford talking about Duke Nukem Forever. He's like, there's this amazing moment at the beginning of Duke Nukem Forever where he gets a key card and then he throws it away and he says, we don't need no stinking key cards. It's like, it felt a little bit like that, like, hey, we heard your feedback, everybody. No more trolls.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is like what Randy Pitchford said. You're right, Suriel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the best part of a moment like that is when the developer themselves calls it out and says it's a cool marketing and not a surprise for players to experience.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm trying to contextualize that. Is that like early? Is that early in your career when you're just starting at Game Informer?
Yep. So like,
I feel like that's why that memory sticks in, right?
Yes.
It's like,
yeah.
You're more impressionable, and you're like, oh, this guy's he's got something to say. This is interesting. That's an interesting twist, and then that memory stays, even though there's thousands of moments like that in other video games. That's the one that sticks.
No, I think it's everybody agrees. I don't think it's just from my own perception. I'm looking at it objectively. I think it's a Randy pitch for keycard kind of moment.
Yeah, and then that's why you high-fived them and said, "Yeah, screw keycards." And you both
That's right.
did one.
Yeah, metal horns. Let's see. Jason Wojnar writes in and says, what is this? Peeves about the gameplay are more notable this time around for me. The camera's way too close to Kratos while switching between weapons in the middle of battle. It's uncomfortable and it leads to me getting hit while I claw my hand over to reach the D-pad. Yeah, I feel like I should be switching more. I feel like it wants me to do some killer cool combos switching between the weapons, but I haven't really been doing it that much.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of my things that I realized when I played the original game, and also getting more of that in this game, is that it feels more like, this is especially coming off of other stylish action games or whatever, but this combat feels less kind of about how cool the combos are and more about making sure that you are kind of following what the game wants you to do, versus oh, these enemies are frosted, switch to this thing, or these enemies are higher levels, so pay attention, or this enemy is about to do the thing. It feels more utilitarian, of get through this encounter any way you can, versus something like Devil May Cry, where the whole point is don't just get through it, do cool stuff. So this game isn't incentivizing you to be super stylish. It just wants you to use the upgrades that you have to deal more damage, right? So it feels less about style and more about utility.
Yeah. MD Bat says, are any other RPG gamers, oh boy, I got it. Are any other RPG gamers really liking the new upgrade system in this game? I love that almost all the gear I get is capable of being upgraded all the way to level 9. In the first game, most gear can only be upgraded 3 to 4 times before maxing out, forcing you to use newer gear as you progressed, and not getting attached to anything you might really like. Also enjoy that armor and weapons change appearance as they gain levels. It is nice.
Yeah, I really like this aspect. It's something, though, that I am of two minds of, because I really enjoy all the RPG aspects. I like that in a game. It makes me feel like the things I'm doing actually matters and everything feeds into each other very well. The only thing for me is the execution of it feels very messy to me, because it feels like I've got this here and then I've got this here and there's another thing in this menu and then I can upgrade in this place and then I can go to shops to upgrade this part. And I'm kind of feeling like I know I'm gonna miss something really important, and I forgot to upgrade this particular skill because that's not in the normal skill tree, that's in the Kratos skill tree over here or whatever. You know what I mean?
I'm kind of in that same position. I think I've said before that I think crafting is my least favorite thing in games, and so the amount of crafting in this game definitely feels oh, you're putting too much RPG in my action game.
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest manifestation is they have to kind of do something like this, because of a lot of the fun parts of this game are finding different chests and opening resources, and what do they give you is that they have to give you a lot of different resources, and so that leads to there being this whole gear system. But yeah, that's definitely the thing where it's I want to set I just want to set this to simple, right? To just I think there is an auto equip function, but I don't know if that you can just apply that to everything. And I want to allocate skill points, but in terms of armor stuff, I don't want to necessarily have to worry about what armor I'm equipping as Kratos. So I've kind of tried to stick with the default armor that you get, because they mentioned that you can transmog, which is to make it look like anything else. Once you get an armor up to max level, you can just apply that look to any armor that you get.
Yeah.
But it definitely feels because I'm trying to invest in the default piece of armor so I can just make everything look the same, that I think that thing is falling behind a lot of other armor that I could be getting from optional activities. And I just feel I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that side stuff because that side stuff has been fun. But I the reward system. I definitely feel I could take it or leave it.
Yeah.
What you're being rewarded with, I could take the actual opening the chests, fighting those optional bosses. Totally down to do that regardless of the reward. But I feel there should just be a option of don't make me not worry about the gear, right?
Right. And I'm totally cool with crafting. I love the crafting. But I have to keep track of now the kind of handle I have and the runes that's on that handle. And now we just got a special ability thing, which I can't remember what the name of that is right now. And there's just a lot of different places to go to, and I think XP is you upgrade I can't remember exactly
It's like
what
a
that
resource,
special ability is. Yeah. So like you could go to the skill tree and use up all of your XP and think like, okay, that's how I used it, and then go back to the special ability and be like, oh shoot, I meant to upgrade this because it gives me a really cool ability, but I wasn't here when I did that.
And there's just a ton of resources to keep track of. It's like hard to know, like, oh, I got a legendary chest. Like, wait, what item is that? Like, what upgrade path does that forward me on? Of like, oh, is this for armor? Is this for my blades? Is this the special thing that I need to upgrade the Leviathan axe? Or is it like a thing that I need for a piece of gear? How many of these iron things that carry across all the armors do I have? Like, all that's like keeping track of all of that stuff is maybe like the biggest issue I have with the game so far.
I think part of it kind of ties into, a couple people wrote in about it, but yeah, the UI, it's one of those things like, I don't know how you improve it, but it definitely feels like a lot to navigate when you first start at the game. It's like, okay, it feels like a mess, but again, they're smarter than I am, so I assume it's the best way to lay this out.
And that's the thing that they most explicitly tutorialize, right? Of just like, hey, you just got a new resource. Take the time out to go to the proper menu, the proper tab on this specific menu, and make sure that you upgrade that stuff, and like make sure you keep this stuff in mind. And like so, but you know, like basically the only times you should really keep track of it is whenever you find a new Sindri or Brock, and that feels like a very much like the stopping point of like, okay, time to do like 10, 15 minutes of like, you know, maybe not 15, but like time to do some menu management for a while, and then I'll be back on my adventure.
So one thing I really like though is in terms of like RPG mechanics is if you use a move a certain amount of times, right? It goes bronze, silver, gold. Once it's gold, you unlock those modifiers. And then it's like, do you want it? It's really funny. It's like, this will do slightly more damage or a lot more stun. And I'm like, I'll take the damage. They're trying to discourage you from doing damage because it's like, this will, it'll only be slight. It'll only be slightly more damage or more elemental. And I'm like, take the damage every time. But I like that. I like the being rewarded for using your
feats,
favorite moves. Yeah, the feats. Yeah. Those are cool.
That is a Wolfenstein 2 system, I believe, where it's like your upgrades were all determined by like, did you kill a bunch of people with this gun in this specific way? You get a bonus for that. Like, and I think that is like the most clever like upgrade system in this game. It's just like if you do cool stuff, you'll be rewarded for it, right? And like everything else is just like, did you find enough chests? Then you can, you know, face this boss, which is like a very RPG thing, right? But in this game more than like something like Horizon, it feels a little bit like I could take it or leave it in this game versus something like Horizon.
Yeah. Jonathan R. says, what has surprised me the most in this game is how much slower paced it is than 2018. It took me 3 hours of playtime to get the compass, which is just a basic UI element. After finishing the Old Friends quest, I still had only one runic attack for each of Kratos' weapons. Yeah, same here. And just now feel like the game has started to hit its stride. After how often I heard praise for the focus of the last game, it surprised me how much more sprawling this entry seems to be. Yeah, that's what everybody keeps saying who's finished this game is it is a lot bigger than you expect. There's a lot of content squeezed in here.
I think it's also kind of bleeding into the storytelling where like that kind of dialogue system definitely feels like it's carrying a lot of water for like, okay, beginning of this first like hour, 2 hours of this game, really, really strong. We loved it a lot. And then like you kind of get into like, okay, now you're going to fight like basically the equivalent of critters for like X amount of time. And then like hours later, we'll hit you with another story beat. And like from basically like, okay, now you're in a new realm. That's really cool. And then we're going to like, and then now you're kind of doing busy work puzzles and critters. And then we can hit you with another like, hey, here's Tyr. And then like, that's a big important moment. So like, it feels like a lot of the story beats that I think would have hit a lot earlier in the previous game, they're having to pad that out more. And that dialogue system is like a lot of really cool conversations, but it definitely like 6 hours in it, I definitely feel like I expect it to be a little further along in like what the arc of this game is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, even with people writing about like, oh, the water wheels and all that stuff, I do feel like just modern Sony design overall, like it's moving you along so quickly. Where even parts where it does kind of bog down, it's like it's not that bad. Like, it's still moving pretty
also,
well.
I mean, like I said, this feels like the most funneled part of the game so far, where it's just like, okay, now we're gonna open it up. So I'm curious to see how they keep a pace of that stuff. Like, what does the pacing look like going from here once the game opens up? Is it going to be a thing where it's like all the stuff in this game is so good, which is what I've heard, that like you don't mind that you're kind of like blowing off the end of the world for a while, or like how much do they address that, right? And how much of it, like, because like that first quest, like with Mimir, where they're like, oh, it'd be really cool if you kind of redeemed me in the eyes of the dwarves by shutting down these things, but also it's like, well, we're kind of on a time limit here of like, we want to find Tyr before Odin does, so like let's maybe push this. But it's like how big of a conflict is that going to be going forward is definitely the thing, because it definitely felt like for a little while. It feels like, oh yeah, I totally forgot that the end of the world is coming. Like, because you're just kind of off doing other stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I love that moment. You're on the boat, right?
Yeah.
It's like camera shows you, here's the main quest. Here's where you go if you want to explore. They could not be more explicit, but also non-judgmental. They're like, if you want to do this, cool. If you want to do this, very cool. Like, do what you want to do. We're just letting you know this is where you go for that. This is where you go for that. You know, like I felt very comforted in that moment. It was just like they're just very explicitly telling me, go off.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Do we all expect we're going to all the realms? I think none of them are going to be locked off in this game.
Well, there's the one where like Muspelheim, whatever, like the fighting arena style one. It seemed like you're kind of unlocking keys to go there. So I think you can eventually go there, but you're gonna kind of have to unlock it as you go. But yeah, I think it's gonna go that way. And then Asgard's gonna be the all right point of no return. Once you go through this, no coming back type of thing.
Yeah, I could see Midgard being the less of like here's another realm you can explore, and more like, I don't know, like the old Hyrule and Wind Waker, where it's like we're gonna come back here a couple of times, but they're gonna be very like. I could see Atreus being the only person who goes back to Midgard and it being in those self-contained segments. But as I say that, I realize that you probably will have to go back as Kratos, because there's definitely like a billion markers of like, hey, here are these weeds and here's this rock that he can't lift, right? So I'm guessing you're going to go back as Kratos at some point. But I can see it being less of its own realm and more like, here's kind of a small concentrated dose of the old Midgard that we need you to go back to. But I don't expect it to be like, here's another section of Midgard that you can fully explore and find all the ravens in.
Do you think that they put so many of those branches that need to be lit on fire in Atreus' path on Midgard for narrative reasons or strictly for Metroid reasons of come back here later, winky winky? Because I do think it's kind of an interesting point to
do you think going back is going to be optional or mandatory? Is that what you're saying?
I guess that's where I'm going with it, because I think it's cooler of an idea design-wise if you're Atreus and just mechanically you're missing Kratos because there's all these opportunities that you can't take advantage of. I think that's smart, and I'm hoping it's that.
I could see there being like because you know, like in the Freya section, they're like, do not expect the same mercy for your father. I feel like they kind of have to follow up on that beat of like, at some point, I think my expectation is that Freya and Kratos will come to terms of like, I think at some point Freya's going to realize like it would benefit you, even though you've lost a child in this and you hate this person, to like quote unquote be better, right? And like get over that for the sake of helping the realms. And so I think that's gonna require Kratos to go back to Midgard at some point. Yeah. But I hope we go back there, because there's definitely like that was like the one thing where it's like, here's a giant glowing object that I don't think I was able to get there when I visited. Like there's like when you're on a lift, there's like a purple glowing object that I had to like, I forced myself not to reload a save of just like, I've been trying to figure out how to get that thing for way too long. I'm probably coming back here. I will get it then. But there was this anxiety building of like, what if I missed it? What if I can't come back? And I stressed out about it more than I should have.
I think you'll be back. I think you'll be on your dog sled on the frozen ice. That's my theory.
I sincerely hope that's the case.
Yeah, somebody wrote in, I can't find it right now, I'm sorry, but they wrote in saying that apparently the PlayStation blog a while ago mentioned that, like, by the way, you can go back and finish all quests throughout the entire game. Don't worry, these things aren't going to be gated and locked off.
It's weird that they mentioned me by name when they said that.
Yeah, it was really odd.
You feel seen. You feel like they, from a perspective of people who play games, understand what a person who plays a game would be concerned about.
Yeah. It feels like they have their idea of what they want the game to be, and then like this sequel is less about like let's introduce this new twist. Like there's not like a crazy new mechanic that it like totally redefines how you play it, and more like let's address all of the issues that people had with the previous game of like all these things that people requested. Let's be a real people pleasing game, and just kind of like everything that you wanted in that last game, like down to like the smallest things. We're gonna go ahead and fix all like it reads like a lot of enormous patch notes of we've really addressed everything that people have wanted, and like in a lot of cases it's like that's the right call.
Yeah, I feel like every review for God of War 2018 was just talking about that the game was too nice to animals, which I think is weird. So
that is a weird complaint.
And then they course corrected on this one, just had animals dying left and right in the opening. I feel like it's a bad
cruel game you've ever played.
Yeah, it's a terrible back of the box bullet point. Yeah. Nick from Atlanta, God, you think I was serious?
I did. I was really confused about that.
All right, yeah.
I was like, what reviews was he reading?
Come on, this is dumb.
I mean, on the box they say like, does the dog die? Yes, minutes in is what they said. On bullet point.
Yeah. Sam Danby says, hey, how many pets do you think are going to be named Fenrir in the next 6 months? Millions.
Millions.
Most babies, most pets, most goldfish.
The annual Fenrir Con is coming. Only dogs named Fenrir are allowed.
That's right. Nicholas Freitas writes in and says, "Is it just me or does the fur on the wolves and the hair simulation in the game look insane?" It is very good. It looks fantastic. I definitely
the hair in general in this game looks really nice.
Yeah, really good. Yeah. I really want to see someone playing this on a PS4 because my mind is boggled by how they could be getting the level of detail.
Yeah, bad fur. They don't even have fur. It just kind of looks like a seal for the dogs, I think.
Oh, little seal dogs.
It actually just looks like they're wearing a giant black donut around their neck, like whenever anyone's wearing fur.
I feel like this is an unpopular take. This is a hot take, but I actually really like cramming my body through crevices. You know, the old school loading between sections.
Yeah,
we shouldn't have to do that anymore if we have a solid state drive. I actually love that stuff.
Why?
That has been a point of contention also, because I think developers have been saying it's not because of loading. We don't that's not why we're doing it a lot of the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess
it's just to break pace.
I think it's a lot of it hey, if we're going to solve this puzzle, we don't want you going back all the way across to see if there's something else, like some other location where you might it is we want you here for this section for a lot of, maybe technical design reasons. But I've seen a lot of pushback on saying that those are for loading, but I haven't seen a ton of logic for for why those exist otherwise. But it definitely seems hey, we just had a big encounter. We need you to kind of slow down for a little bit. So here, walk through this thing while we, while you consider hey, we're going to drop another story beat, maybe take a break and think about, hey, maybe I should go in the menus for a little bit. Right. Those are assumptions on my part, but it definitely, I've seen a lot of tweets saying it's not for loading.
Huh. Yeah. Zach McMahon wrote in about that exact thing and he's saying he thinks it's for pacing. So it's not just you're running around at the same pace the entire time.
Right. And just directions too, because there have been plenty of times I've got kind of turned around and I come back to, I'm oh, no, I remember shuffling through this particular crevice, so I must be going the wrong way. Then also, I really kind of like that because I think there are a lot of things that are sort of new to 2018 and this as a part of the God of War series, but there are some things that really harken back to the legacy of this entire series. And that's one of them in a strange way is kind of weirdly nostalgic for the old ways of things, and shuffling through things is one of them. Having this really weird combat where everything else is kind of grounded and serious, and then the enemies are just floating as I hit them. That really harkens back to an older time. So I think there's some really interesting ways that they're playing with the memory of people who have played games for a really long time in general, but this series in particular.
The crevice I'm fine with. It reminds me of Final Fantasy VII Remake, so it has to be good, of course. But the one that killed me in this game is when you're on the boat and the crevice equivalent for the boat where they lean back in the canoe and kind of go under that section. It's I've never seen a boat crevice before. This is breaking ground.
There's also that part where you basically go through Splash Mountain in the mines.
Right.
Oh yes, I was so the first game where they have him go through and talk to Athena was this is very Disney ride, and then having this again, I'm there's some kind of Disney crossover we don't know about that we
even bump against the boundaries. You'd even it was don't.
Yeah, yes,
it's so similar. It's
Did you guys get that ambient dialogue line where he says he's not paying for the photo?
Yeah, I thought that was weird.
Put your hands in the air, Dad.
Okay, joke again. God, I'm 2 seconds behind.
King of comedy. Come on, Kyle
That would be
Bossman.
breaking the fourth wall.
Keep up.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Matt Lynch.
Best crevice. The best crevice for me is there's a dwarves house in the village that you just get on your knees and crawl through this person's house. It's so cool.
Yeah,
and it's helps with scale and everything. It's nice.
One of the things that I came away with from playing, I played God of War 2 and 3 and then 2018.
Wow.
And the similarities across all of those games are actually more than I thought they would be. The camera is really the biggest difference because there are sections in God of War 2 and 3 where it's okay, there's a giant lava pit. Instead of jumping over it, Kratos has to stick his blades into the wall and kind of slowly crawl his way across it. Mm-hmm. So it's not as different from the previous games as I think we were led to as we remember.
That's interesting. Brian W. writes in and says, "Hey, why is there so much old school feeling bad climbing? Every 2 feet, I'm following some runes up or down a cliff. It feels super weird for the character and outdated in terms of a game mechanical wise. It's really becoming bothersome. It's interesting, old school, I guess that just means kind of Uncharted, right?
Yeah, I think too there were a couple of times when I saw the absolute like unforgivable sin of like there's a couple of rocks in my way. I couldn't possibly jump over that to go where I want to go.
Which is like the Sony design thing, but it is especially like noticeable here because again, it's like why don't you just jump over this entire water wheel puzzle? Like I've seen you do it.
Yeah, you can't get around it.
Atreus even says, "Good thing I like climbing."
Yeah.
I would choose to do this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, like how they're signifying the areas you can climb on. Where in the first game, or 2018's, I constantly say first game, I'm sorry. But in 2018's game, weren't the handholdy bits, they were all kind of the glowing yellow, and the idea is that it was Fae like guiding you along. And so they couldn't do that again this game. So now it's just kind of some reddish runes looking thing, I guess, as the indicator.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some justification of like, oh, maybe Tyr left him behind or something. But yeah, it feels more noticeable how like how much the pathing stands out in terms of like, oh, that's the thing I'm supposed to climb on because there's basically the equivalent of like a giant glowing arrow telling me where to go.
Right. Yeah. Sam Danby asked, does anyone else wish that there was a jump button though, just to help with the exploration?
It doesn't feel necessary, and like it does seem like they designed everything around not having it, but yeah, the fact that it feels almost Zelda-like, and the like, well, you jump when you need to, right? When there's a gap that you need to cross, that's when you jump. You don't need to have an explicit jump button.
It'd be wrong, I think, if you could just make Kratos jump on a wheel. Like he's just a big heavy man now. You know what I mean? Like it'd be weird if he's so hut. If you could just do that to that person, it would feel wrong, I think.
Yep,
there is also like this. I'm not joking, but like there is a puzzle where like you get Trace to like crawl into a crevice, and then he's like moving. He's like, oh come on, you could make this jump, and like. Yeah. And then like you solve the puzzle. It's like, can you at least make that one? And then you jump that gap, right? Like, so they are kind of commenting on like maybe Kratos is getting a little bit old, but it feels like this flimsiest justification for it.
Yeah, there's a lot of knees
Thor
jokes.
implies that Kratos is not what he used to be at all. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I feel like he's definitely had a power downgrade.
Well, I don't know about power downgrade. I think he was just holding back, and by the end of that fight, then finally he's like, oh, okay, now this is the God of War, and he like spits out the tooth and stuff. So I think
it's about the rage. It's more about the rage.
I think so.
Than his power
I think
level.
so. Yeah, but the stuff, the critiques about the knees, I think his knees are certainly not what they used to be, and maybe Thor was noticing that. Real quick, while we're talking about loading stuff, at least in the vicinity of it, Zachary Sweet says, I was initially going to complain about the Yggdrasil loading screens forcing you to walk forward, but here's a PSA. You don't need to move at all, and the door will appear right in front of Kratos. I now really enjoy these sections, allowing me to put the controller down for a little and just listen to the banter between the characters. That's good. That's a good tip. Certainly City says, the compass in this game truly has a mind of its own. There's times
Turned it off.
Turn it off. Wow, bold.
Yeah, that compass is ridiculous. Just turn that thing off.
I kind of missed it as Atreus, though. I wonder if Atreus sections, because he doesn't have the item, so lore-wise he can't have the compass, if those are all going to be a little bit more linear, assuming there's going to be more Atreus sections, which I think we were all in agreement are going to happen. But it helps just look at the map, I think, because when the first time you're let free in that boat, and I was trying to track down all those smokestacks, I feel like looking at the compass, they were just all over the place. It's like, okay, I just need to look at this map and ballpark it, like hug the right-hand shore, and you'll be better off.
I basically just looked at the number of like, okay, that's the 220 meter one that I just watched. I'm going to keep an eye on that one until I get there. But yeah, there's definitely already immediately it seemed like, oh, maybe I wonder how many icons they can fit on this thing, because it definitely seems like if they put too many, it can definitely get very confusing.
Yeah. Linson Wu wrote in, and they aren't the only person who wrote in about this. They said, I've always thought Atreus looks like Kyle Bossman.
And more so now?
Maybe.
In his awkward teenage stage.
Yeah,
sure.
Congratulations. I think that's a compliment, that as he's growing into a man, he's looking more and more like a peak man Kyle Bossman.
Sure.
Okay, there we go. And again, I want to stress, not the only person who wrote in about that. It is a weird trend.
Do you think it's a bit? Do you think like everybody like got together? Let's all write this.
I don't think so. I don't think people were. I don't know what the Easy Allies community is all about. Maybe they're really into these bits about your body, but I don't think so, man. I think you need to take a hard look in the mirror. There's something happening there. Brian Ventura says, Kratos has yet to call Atreus boy in Ragnarok, and I hope he never does it again. It makes sense. Atreus is older, and he's earned Kratos' respect. Yeah, I'm very thankful. I think the internet's burned me out in a big way on the boy stuff. I think I've had it. I'm happy it's not a big thing here so far.
He says his name. It's beautiful, actually. It's nice.
Yeah.
They've explicitly addressed that. Like they've talked about like we know. I don't like he talks about some other stuff, but that I won't spoil. But like it definitely seems like they're aware.
Wait, the developers are, you mean?
Yeah, that they're aware of like how that became a whole meme. But yeah, they've talked about, well, if he calls him Atreus, then it seems like he's matured. So we kind of get to kill two birds with one stone of like character growth and also like not leaning into the memes.
Yeah. Kyle, how judgy are you of other gaming sites or gaming sites in general? Like if you see GameSpot tweet out like, boy, ! Don't miss our review for God of War Ragnarok. Do you go, come on, guys?
How judgy am I of other? I try to not. Here's what I try to do. Here's what I try to do in my brain, because it's hard not to be judgy. You have to say we're all on the same team. I say this out loud a lot. We're all on the same team. We're all here trying to do the exact same thing. You know what I mean? It's dog eat dog. It's like a tough world out there. Like no judgment. Do what you got to do to get clicks.
Really? No judgment ever?
No. That's just what I say to myself out loud.
Okay.
Think about the amount of times that you were like writing that kind of thing, and it was like after a long week, and you're just like, I've been playing this forever, and I hate this now, and I just want this out. I will make the easiest common denominator joke. It will get clicks. I 100% understand anybody who does that, and I make a fair amount of like stupid jokes myself, so I am not a person to throw rocks in this class.
I'm not above a stupid joke, but I feel like there's a difference between a stupid joke and then just going for what's the meme about this game? All right, send out on this official company account the official meme from this game.
Yeah,
everyone
like,
has
it's
one.
Also that you know, who knows? That's that social person's 15th headline that they've had to write that day, and it's like, look, I just want to tell you about the deal on the PS5 God of War version. Like,
just click this freaking thing.
Boy, look at this deal. Like, come on. I need some amount of flavor to catch your attention, and like this is the path I've chosen.
You're right. Thanks everybody for defending humanity. I think you've all done a service here today. Hey, should we talk about the beginning of this game? By the way, if anybody wants a poo-poo pee-pee break, feel free to let us know. But you do have to claim that you need a poo-poo pee-pee break during the video. So just so you all know.
Even if you refill your coffee.
Yeah, that's right. As long as you refill it with a splash of poo-poo and pee-pee. Nick from Atlanta.
Jill, what's the Norse version of pee-pee poo-poo?
I'll look that up.
All right, thank you. Nick from Atlanta writes in and says, I was really struck by Freya's first scream of Kratos. Danielle Bisutti did a great job of conveying the grief and rage in her voice. She even mentioned on Twitter that they were doing the mocap for the game at the same time. Also, it's really impressive that she turned into a falcon for this game. I think she turned into a falcon in the last game. Not that often, but I believe...
No, he means the actress.
Oh my God, for the mocap session.
Yeah.
Wow, unbelievable work. I love that. I love a good, ruthless, quote unquote, villain. I love that she's just there and there's no real discussion. It's just immediately... Even I went back and replayed it, and it does seem like she's trying to snap Kratos' neck like he snapped Baldur's. Like, zero hesitation, she's just gonna scream and just lunge herself at him. It's so good.
Yeah, I almost expected her to be more of a presence throughout the rest of the game instead of like the second time is because you go to her. I definitely thought it was going to be an almost like nemesis type situation of like, as you're adventuring, she's just like, surprise Freya, like you have to fight, you fight her at like random points in the, well, like probably prescriptive, but like she was going to be more of a relentless presence throughout the rest of the game so far.
Yeah.
I hope they do end up doing that of just like her encounters just come out of nowhere of like, oh, I'm in the, like, not to spoil too far, but like I'm in this other realm, and then like I'm on this, getting whatever the next MacGuffin, and it's like I've found you, like I'm going to try to kill you, and like this is like the next beat in this plot line. Like
she's in a little boat behind you, just paddling faster, and you just have to go around.
She's like, oh no, I have to paddle.
This is harder than it looks.
Yeah. Boy, paddle.
Ben Shively writes in and says, with Freya attacking Kratos almost immediately as the game starts, can it be implied that she's constantly hunting them every time they leave their house? Kratos and Atreus don't really seem surprised to see her, so being constantly ambushed by her must be a normal occurrence. I know they killed her son, but come on, move on. Well,
yeah, I think that also ties into like why they've kind of chosen to stay there, because the whole first 30 minutes of the game are like, oh, the protection stave that we had up is gone. We're not sure why, so now we need to leave again. So it definitely seems like they were in a position where like anytime we leave the safety of the protection stave, Freya is just going to be on our ass immediately. Like we need to pick the moments where we venture out too far beyond this line very carefully. And I think this is like, well, the thing is gone, so she is there immediately.
And also, I like the implication that she's sending these raiders after Kratos as well. That
Oh, did you take that?
The phrase "Winterman" comes from her, I think.
Oh, I didn't think
I think
that.
in one of the logs, it's like written from the perspective of one of the raiders, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is all that guy's fault. We're gonna go kill a god or something like that."
And it makes a ton of sense because like she is a literal god, and these are all like the people who like worship me. Of just like I've basically sicked an entire religion onto you.
Yeah,
like these people are like crazed people who are like, we will worship your, like we are like worshiping at the altar of your death is what those like wild men are basically doing.
So the stave, the status of the stave, this is what the deepest dive is for, is to really talk about this. Because they're gunning it when she's attacking them, and then Kratos is like, hang on, we're almost to the stave, we're almost in our safety bubble and all that stuff. So I don't think it's her attacking because the stave is down then. And I think the stave then shatters when Atreus turns into the bear, right? And that's the moment where it goes down. But it is that confusing thing of, they talk about like, oh, how are all these wild people inside of this thing? Maybe they're in here when I put the stave back up.
And theoretically, Odin and Thor should not have been able to get to the house. And so the question about what is happening there is...
Well, I think...
Well, the idea is that when it breaks, that's when like Odin and Thor are like, oh, there they are, right?
Were they just like hiding and like waiting for them to come back? Because they weren't just like chilling in the house, and then when they came in, they were like ominously sitting in their chair and turned around slowly. Like they waited for Kratos and Atreus to go to the house and put their heads to bed.
Didn't you take it as like the stave was down, and then maybe Odin saw it with the ravens, and it's like, now we gotta journey out there?
As soon as they came back, they fixed the stave. So they should have been protected.
I think it's also like we saw this ping on our radar effectively, and then it took us a while to investigate, because it is kind of like, oh, okay, we're done with our first thing, we fixed the stave, go to sleep, and you are awoken by Thor, right? So there is some amount of like, it took us a little while to find you, but that the stave being down for even that long was enough for them to like figure out where they were.
So they were already in the bubble.
They would have had to be there first.
Yeah, so they were in the bubble when the bubble was re-put up. Is that what you're saying, Jill?
Yeah.
Okay.
What sort of bubble is going to propel Odin, though? I don't want to believe in a stave that could keep Odin out.
But then why didn't he visit before then?
Ragnarok started, baby.
Well, it's less about like this physically keep me out, and more about like I don't know where you are. But once I saw like, hey, the thing is down, that's where they are. Then like, even if the stave was up, then maybe he can break through it. There's a little bit of maybe inconsistency, or there's just a line or something that justifies it at some point.
Right. Or it's like we're supposed to believe like Odin's so powerful, like Kyle was saying, he could just decide to walk in if he wanted to. And
God, I really love that scene. So Thor goes first.
Yeah.
Yes.
They have a conversation. It's clear it's going to go one way. So he calls a raven over and then sends the raven out to go get Odin, who then arrives second.
Right. The ravens kind of fly in with Thor. But yeah, we had somebody wrote in about this as well, but I thought the same thing. But it's such a good twist of having the tease from the end of the last game of like, all right, Thor, and he's got his hand over Mjolnir, but then it turns out he was just reaching for mead and be like, hey, can I come in? I got some beer, basically. And it is, somebody wrote in about it, and I thought the exact same thing. It does feel a little bit like Last Jedi, of like, from the tease of Luke at the end of Force Awakens, then just throwing the lightsaber. It is such a good pivot.
Yeah. Except, I mean, in this case, 10 minutes later, there is a big dramatic fight with that hammer.
Yes, exactly.
I have a juxtaposition of the two fathers there, too. That whole scene is really cool because, like, it is very clear that Kratos is fighting for his son and for the love of his son. It is also equally clear that Thor is just kind of fighting, using the excuse of the death of his sons to fight this thing that he finds exciting.
Right.
Where, like, he's like, oh, I'm gonna claim the blood debt to my sons, and then he was just kind of like, okay, you showed me the rage. I'm gonna let you go. It's like he did not care that his sons were dead.
No, there's even some reference too of like, they weren't exactly great people there, Thor. I think Odin even references, about like, Modi, that's no big deal. But like Baldur was actually helpful. He was kind of my scout. That actually hurt me a little bit. Nobby Buckles, otherwise known as Dave, writes in and says, I came into this as blind as possible, and boy was I shocked to hear Richard Schiff as Odin. Did anyone else do a literal double take when you realized whose voice that was? A lot of West Wing fans, it turns out.
It's his appearance.
Yes, it just looks like him, yeah.
It wasn't his voice to me. It was like, oh, that's that guy.
That's Eddie from The Lost World.
And he's doing kind of like a New York accent. And I realize in this game, like, accents don't matter for anything. Like anybody from anywhere can have any accent. But yeah, the accent was taking me back too.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that in the trailer that they artificially like darkened him in the silhouette. And then the actual game, it's like, nope, they just open the door and you can just see Odin right there. But yeah, to hide Odin in the marketing more or less throughout this run up to release is really incredible. Thomas Damgard says, I love the approach they took with Odin. Interpreting him as a mob boss is so spot on. It really differentiates the Norse pantheon from the Greek gods in the OG trilogy. Uncharted Wolf writes in on Patreon and says, I want to focus in on my favorite line in the game so far. It's when Odin first enters and says, you know who I am. It's a perfect showcase of his cocky nature while encapsulating his essence through a single line of dialogue, something very difficult for any writer to pull off. That is a good point for sure.
Yeah.
Because that line is for us, the audience, too.
Yep, exactly.
Love that stuff, yeah.
And then, and even before that, when Thor's in there and there's drinking and Thor like tries to offer beer to Atreus, it's just a weird moment. But then when he has that line where he just goes, would you consider yourself a calm and reasonable person? That part is so good. And not to, I know we're referencing a lot of other stuff with this, but I was thinking like, why does this feel familiar? I wonder what they're modeling that exchange off of. And it feels a little bit like Mission Impossible 3 with Philip Seymour Hoffman, where he's like, you got a wife, you got a daughter, I'm going to find her, I'm going to hurt her. It's kind of like, it's that same delivery, right?
I mean, it's essentially too like the standoff before the Wild West, like gunfight. It's like, we're all calm and reasonable. No one needs to get their guns out, but it's going to come.
Putting the weapons on the table, like it's such good stuff. I was really
the sound design is crazy when they both of them sound heavy as hell when they just drop the axe and the hammer. Yeah, it's so cool.
It like you that all like basically tells you like this whole conversation's a farce. They don't care. They're doing it as even less than a courtesy because like the moment you're like, if you don't come after us, we won't come after you. And it feels like an obligation when they're saying that. So he says no, and then immediately goes to don't take all day, and then he just walks away like that. Yeah. The fact that it's like we're doing this because we feel we have to, but we both know that's not going to work here.
Yeah, I got it. During this scene, and then even like Tyr in the house jumping ahead, I just realized like, having a bunch of gods in one house talking to each other, that's as good as it gets. I am so happy. Then I realized like, oh, that's why I liked Hades so much. It turns out that's kind of all that game was in a way, right? But Yarf writes in on Patreon, good old Yarf, and says, first meeting with Thor and Odin, 10 out of 10. Odin's voice rising, what you did to his boys? Self-defense. The brewing tension between Thor and... Can you do that line better, Kyle? Can you do a better Odin? You could try.
No, that was really good.
Oh, thanks. Just try, though, man. You can do it.
I'm not going to upstage the host.
Okay, thanks, man. Please don't make me look like an asshole. The brewing tension between Thor and Kratos, the loudest, quote-unquote, conversation without words I've ever seen in a game, just body language and a sentence here or there. And then it was all ruined by Odin calling Freya his ex. In this storied era of gods from antiquity, I hated when he just called her an ex. There's something to it. I get it. But they're modernish with their language.
Yeah, this game pretty like flagrantly like disregards the like ye olde English style, and I think that's a very like considered direction of like it wouldn't sound old to them. It would sound as like they to them it would sound like this is how people just talk. So it's like to translate that to us, I can see how the line would be abrasive of like if someone were saying like, oh, that's like very on fleek or whatever, like that would obviously be kind of weird. But like they're kind of towing that line of like we want to make sure that it sounds modern, not too kind of stilted, but we also want to be aware of like not necessarily pushing people's boundaries in terms of like what sounds reasonable.
Plus, it's just about the jerkiest way you could say that. And
Sure.
that sort of tells you something about the person saying it.
Yeah, because like I can get my ex in line, I can get her off your back. You know, if you would have said my former lover or something, that's not very mob bossy. Beaten Down Brian writes in, hey Kyle, you know this fella, right? He says, the scene with Kratos, Thor, and Odin gave me the weirdest vibe. It suddenly felt like I was watching a scene from some mafioso movie. It still sticks out to me in what otherwise seems like a really well-written game. Like, it's just kind of jarring to have the full mob vibe there. And Cody Davis kind of has a similar thing where they say the tone of the dialogue kind of kills the vibe for me sometimes. I feel like the lines with the foul language sound forced and unnatural, and the dialect used for Thor and Odin definitely flattened their presence for me. It reminds me of that Titans trailer when Robin said, "F*** Batman," and the world collectively rolled their eyes. Yeah, some people were kind of put off by the tone of these guys, but I love how much Thor was swearing. I thought it was a fun character choice.
And I think it's about like communicating sentiment, right? Like where something like cursing, you know, in a modern sense, like if they had used curses from that era, it would not have the same effect of like, oh, this person is cursing versus like, you know, like if this were a British, like them saying fanny all the time isn't going to be a thing that affects us. Yeah. But it's like they just use right, like they are trying to communicate the sentiment of what they are getting across versus like we need to do it, like make sure we duplicate the language of this accurately.
Right. F*** is a metaphor, as a wise man once said.
Yeah. So, but like I can totally see why it would jar people, and it kind of like it stuck out to me when he used the X thing, but it is like part of like the tone they're trying to set of like this. That line fits because like it's very clear early on from just the way Thor talks that they are not committed to the like we're gonna use ye olde English, right?
Yeah.
There's a moment where Atreus swears a lot when the weird log ride is flipping over. Right?
It's a train, I think, isn't it?
The train's flipping over, and then afterward they go. That was some language back there.
Yeah.
So I actually like when something like that's called out. And he's like, I've heard worse, and then like they get interrupted almost immediately after that. But I like that's a funny call out because it's like at least to them in this world that was unusual.
Yes.
For Atreus to talk like that.
Yep, and it builds up that vibe too of like Kratos and Mimir as kind of the parents of Atreus as well. Like they're kind of looking at each other like, hey, look at our kid here, really pushing the boundaries. All right. Levi writes in and says, I was interested. Looking in the journal to get a perspective about Odin from Kratos. He said essentially in the journal that he didn't mind the deal offered from Odin, although he was skeptical until the threat to Freya turned him into a hard no.
Huh. Cool.
Yeah, there's also like Mimir basically says, do not trust this person whatsoever. And it makes it very clear. I think the Freya line makes it very clear is that like he wants you to say yes. You know, even though he expects that you won't, but he is like nothing that this person says he is committed to, because if he is willing to do that, then he can just as easily go back to it, like go back on it. Like there's nothing this man will not sacrifice to get what he wants. And so like no matter if I agree to this, then I'm entering into a bargain with someone who I basically cannot trust. And so even if that would have been like the right choice in terms of keeping the peace, Kratos already knows that there is no god who can keep their word that way. And so like he has that experience of like, you are not going to fool me.
I'm just too much of a coward, but I heard Odin's deal and was like, win-win. Seems ideal. Yeah. Like just all you gotta do is
he's very convincing, and that's like the beauty of that scene.
It's literally just stop searching for Tyr, and then your boy will be safe, and everybody will be safe, and everyone will be cool, and we can go on with our lives. Like who wouldn't take that deal?
But like Kratos has gone through a pantheon of lying gods, and I'm sure in his mind he was seeing like Zeus saying this to him, and it's like, no, you're not planning on keeping. And I think they did this so well too, because I, as a player watching this, at the very end when Kratos comes back and picks up the coin, I was like, no, don't pick up that coin. There's something about it that's going to be terrible, and I don't trust anything about this. So they've gotten me even to like completely not trust anything that comes from these gods whatsoever. And when he tossed it out, I'm like, yes, thank you.
It did make me laugh, that image of him tossing out the coins, but then spending the rest of the game like, hack silver, I need more hack silver, just like picking it up from every box frantically.
And I think there's something really interesting at play with audience expectations, where there was a conversation that happened between Atreus and Odin that we'll probably never see.
Yes.
Yes.
Something was offered, something was said, and we have to simply trust Atreus as an audience that he's telling us the whole truth. And so I think that's really fun.
Well, especially then when you play as Atreus and he's role playing as Kratos and kind of talking to himself, and he confesses there that, like, why would I trust you if you keep lying? And then Atreus is like, yeah, I guess that's a fair point.
He says as he's breaking Kratos' trust by going back to Freya.
Right. So it's just reinforcing the idea of, like, yeah, we didn't see that conversation, and Atreus has told us himself that he is a liar.
Right. And, like, neither Kratos nor Mimir believe that whatever Atreus told us is the whole story.
Right. And so what he said is, he's like, yeah, he gave this coin to repair the roof, and then he invited me to go to Asgard. And I said no, of course.
Yeah. Oh, man. Something's up.
Yeah. But then even Thor says, Odin has a plan for your boy during the fight. He has that quick line. And then just trying to piece together, what he could have possibly said. Then also, I think when he's talking to Freya, Atreus says, Odin has a way of stopping Ragnarok outside of killing all the giants. He has said some line like that. Jill, help me out. Was there any other details there for just hints of what he could have said?
No, I don't remember exactly what he said, but there is the implication that, like, he has stopped Ragnarok in some way. So he's not.
He's not
worried
about it.
But I can't tell to the extent that that's just a bluff.
Well, the part I'm confused about is, it's like, okay, he killed all the giants in Jotunheim to end Ragnarok, but when did that happen? Because the idea is that in the 2018 game, Baldur went to the house to try and find access to Jotunheim to talk to Faye, right? Wasn't that the implication? And so if all the giants were already dead and Odin wasn't worried about them, then why was he sending Baldur to try to get access to the giants?
If the line in this game was like, I've killed the giants to get rid of Ragnarok, it's just like there is some way, like, I don't have to worry about the giants anymore because I've found some way to stop Ragnarok.
Okay, just
Otherwise.
in general, not that they're murdered, but there is some other plan. It's probably involving Loki in some way, right? Is that what we're all on the same page thinking?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, because everybody keeps saying we don't know who Loki is, so I'm interested about what he's done.
Yeah. Let's see. We should go back in time just a little bit. It's all a relative thing anyway. Let's see. Yadarista writes in and says, I started a mental countdown to bear mode after the Bjorn fight. When you go after Atreus and see that, turns out after you defeat that bear, he turns back into Atreus.
So it's like Mob Psycho 100. It's just like a matter of time.
Do you think so?
Until he transforms.
Until he
interesting.
transforms.
Do you think that's going to be his Spartan Rage? Is like going bear mode?
I feel like, does anybody think that we won't control Atreus turning into an animal at a certain point in this game? That feels like a lock, right?
Yeah. No. I hope it uses the same mechanics where it's like you're just jumping up on people as a bear and like smacking them down like the way Kratos does when you enter Spartan Range. I want to see a jumping bear.
Don't some of the like trailers and stuff even show a sort of
okay, go on.
I've seen a lot of the trailers. I stopped watching trailers after a certain point where it was like, okay, that's too much. You've shown me too much.
Yeah.
Right.
There's
no,
trailers.
Like,
go ahead.
Transformation scene. There's nothing clear like that.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where it's going to go. Let's see. Dougie Fresh to Deaf, of course, says, I love how in God of War 2018, one of the things Atreus asks when learning that he's a god, it's the first thing he asks, is he goes, can I turn into an animal? And the opening of God of War Ragnarok answers that question. And then Strange Sloth asks, what other animals do you want to see Atreus turn into in the game? What would make sense?
I mean, we need to see the horse, obviously.
Okay, got to see that horse.
We need one that lets you
run
real
why is it
fast.
obvious? Yeah.
That's one of Loki's bigger animal transformations, is he turns into a female horse and becomes pregnant and then gives birth to like a multi-footed horse that Odin rides.
Sleipnir.
Who impregnates Loki?
Another horse.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
But like
In the context of the story, it is him taking one for the team, let's say.
But he does like it, and it's good.
That's the worst way you could have put it.
For the team of horses.
Yeah. But like, you got to have the flying, the one that lets you access, gaps that are larger than you might want to cross. There's got to be one that's grapple, so maybe like some sort of like lizard with a sticky tongue.
So basically, every like Pokemon you can ride in Pokemon Legends Arceus.
Right.
He's going to have a transformation
that's
branches.
We need one that lets you go up waterfalls, even though you may as well just fly over them.
Yep.
We need one that uses flash.
That's right. Hunter Blessing writes in and they say, did anyone else find it funny that Kratos extinguished a single candle with his hand before going to bed, where there were like 5 more candles and an entire fire right next to his bed?
A whole lot when they left. I'm like, y'all are leaving this place. You don't know how long you're going to be gone. That place is going to be burnt down.
Yeah. Plus,
put out all the candles.
This game knows what we want in general, and they should know that this is what gamers want. We want a long scene, sincerely, of like Kratos like extinguishing each candle. I think it'd be really satisfying. Just a big old Kratos blow.
It's so hard to have unity between like script writers and like set designers.
Yeah.
And so like obviously there was just that, right? Somebody wrote in the script, Kratos extinguishes his flame. Meanwhile, the set designer is like, oh yeah, I gotta put candles all over this place.
Yep, exactly. Or I wonder if it's even like on the mocap stage, they had like a fake table set up and it's like, oh, we're just walking around. Now I'm kind of nervously thinking about how I'm worried about Atreus, so I'll just extinguish a candle. But it's like, yeah, we need to light this room somehow, everybody.
Yeah. So, I mean, we either need the slow him of like him going thing, or he has to do a sick trick with the axe where he's just like, I'm going to like throw the axe in such a way that it extinguishes all the candles. Those are the two things that gamers want.
That would be nice. By the way, Twitch, we're streaming this live on Twitch. Drunkle Frank recommends that Atreus needs to turn into a boat, which and then it's like the Incredibles, like flying across the water and he's the boat. I think it'll happen. Spencer Botine writes in and says, I always wondered what sort of woman would want to be with a man like Kratos, so I love seeing the late Faye appear to him in a dream/flashback. She's calm, stern, and playful in her interactions, and it was fun to see Kratos' demeanor flip to a more submissive role. And then Greg Spencer points out that her pet name for Kratos is Grumbles, which is now what I refer to Kratos as.
Yeah, I like that. Definitely feels like one of the biggest corrections that I'm hoping they do more with, where I think the 2018 game rightfully got a lot of flack for like the way it treated women, of like this, we're going to fridge a woman and then the only other woman basically becomes a villain. Sure. Which I was a little bit like less on the side of like, I can kind of see where Freya is coming from. I didn't necessarily treat her as like, oh, she's kind of like the opposing force is a mother, right? Like for like the thing they used to contrast Kratos' relationship to his son as a father is like a mother's relationship going wrong with her son, right? Like, and so like it does feel like in this game they are trying to give women more of an active role of like, okay, you can kind of like Freya, like you're kind of on her side of like, oh, like she's the bad guy, but like you understand why, right? Like, and then giving Freya more agency in the story of like, this is who I was. Like I here is they are trying to establish the relationship, which is like maybe the number one thing I want to see for the rest of this game is them giving Freya a larger role, giving Faye a larger role, and just kind of putting like giving larger roles to women, which is one of the which like they are a large part of the pantheon. It seems totally fair for them to have that role. So yeah, I definitely want to see more of both Faye and Freya in this game.
We're gonna get the horse. But yeah, I think despite that scene starting so creepily with the hand coming around, I was like, what the hell? It's like that was a really cool way to suck him into the dream and whatnot. But it was one of those moments, a little bit like when you have Atreus as playable. It's like, oh, of course. Like I should have been fully bracing for this. The fact that like you never see the mom in the last game, it's just set up on a silver platter for like, here we go. You want to do something new in the sequel? How about we actually show you that character that seems like both of these games are about trying to untangle the mystery of. Jethrin writes in and says, hey, did it bother anyone else how low fidelity the model for Faye felt next to Kratos? Standing next to her, he looks like an insanely detailed AAA main character, and she felt like a nondescript NPC in an open world game. Yeah, I even playing it again, I was really trying to figure out, like, is it the design or is it something with the actual fidelity of the model? And I can't quite square it. Which one is to blame for the first reaction being like, okay, sure. Right, Kyle?
It feels bad. It feels bad.
It does feel bad.
It might also be lighting. She's blasted with light. Like maybe it's like that, but I don't know. She does. It doesn't seem like like the character model had as much attention put into it in a weird way.
Yeah, I wanted her to look cooler. I think maybe that's what it was, but maybe
I don't know. That's kind of the point. Yeah, because the person talked about how she's not huge. She's not this whole thing. I think she does challenge a lot of expectations in her appearance.
Yeah.
It's hard to like. I don't have like a too clear of like a memory of being like shocked by how bad it looked, but I've definitely one of those things where it's like I could see them devoting less time to her, but I guess it didn't really strike me when I first saw it. Also, it's like part of a dream sequence, so it's kind of like I don't know. I don't know how much I should be paying attention to the fidelity of individual things here, since none of it is real.
Well, I mean, there's that line from Kratos though, where he's like, "It wasn't quite just a dream. It was something more than that." It feels like it's something. And I mean, especially with the way that ends, where well, first of all, it seems like throughout the entire sequence, she's reinforcing that idea of like you need to act. Like she seems like she's pushing Atreus to get out there from beyond the grave. And then at the end, where she's puts the yellow handprint on Kratos' head, she's like, "We are running out of time, you idiot! You have to do stuff. Goodbye." So it definitely feels like just more than a dream sequence. Andrew Burns writes in, by the way, do you think we're going to see her again?
Yeah.
I hope so.
100%.
I think she's going to be like a recurring thing. It's just like the nature of this game is just going to be like, it's going to have to be somewhat sporadic.
Yeah. Andrew Burns writes in and says, as much as I enjoy the introductory fight with Baldur in the last game, I thought the Thor sequence was supplanted in every way. I was particularly struck by how cool it was to be locked in a battle with an opponent that could throw his weapon just like Kratos can. It created a very strategic push and pull as I lined up shots while dodging his, particularly as I charged up the axe with the frost mechanic for an extra punch. Yeah, for sure. Grew up. Jacob Hubbard writes in and says, I really enjoyed the dialogue details in the opening fight with Thor. I noticed it didn't happen when Ben was streaming it, but for me, Thor shouted, "Still trying to remember your old moves, huh?" Which very accurately summed up how I felt in the first hour or so of that game.
I also really liked afterwards when you meet Brock and Sindri again, how they sort of like compliment themselves on how well Mjolnir was made.
Right. Like, hey, it actually was holding up. Yeah, Leviathan was holding up for that too. That's cool. And then Mjolnir was made and had the short handle because Loki was a fly and it bit somebody. Isn't that what it is, Joe?
I don't remember.
Oh, where's your... Okay.
I legitimately don't remember this one.
Oh, interesting.
Loki can turn into a fly?
He can, yeah.
Cool.
It would be cool. Halea Kashishke replies to that comment, talking about more of Thor's lines, where they say, "This is the god that murdered a pantheon because they hurt his feelings." That's so good. And then he's like,
they made more than that, but yeah, that's a...
Yeah.
Come on, Thor. It is more than that. This is the foreign god that bested Baldur. And then this is the man who faced down Sigrun, the Valkyrie queen. And people were wondering, oh yeah, Rory Sublet says, "Hello, God Punchers." That's us. "It's very bold of this game to assume that I have the skill to beat all the Valkyries in the first game based on Thor's line. But thanks for the vote of confidence. Vote of confidence. Is that what that phrase is? Vote of confidence?
They basically vote of confidence. Yeah, it's interesting that they basically just assumed that everyone did that side content, but I kind of thought for a second maybe they checked my save file, but like I don't think there's no way that's on my PS5.
No,
I had the same dumb thought. It's like no, it didn't.
No, I definitely didn't.
They just assumed that everyone did the Valkyrie stuff.
I think they're assuming like
my favorite stuff in that first.
Yeah,
game.
they're assuming that if you remember and know what he's referencing, then you probably did the Valkyrie fight, and if you didn't,
then
it's no big deal.
To you, like
That's a good point. Yeah.
T-Beaks15 says, "Hey there, Ragnarok crew. My favorite part of this section was when Thor called Kratos a dumbass in the middle of their fight. Kratos puts himself in between Thor and his hammer, and then Thor simply recalls his hammer. It's the exact move Kratos does all the time."
Yep.
Yeah, that was excellent.
I love that.
And then Alicia Acker says, "I love the self-awareness of some of the writing in the game. Like when Thor kills Kratos, the reload screen says, the reload screen hits, but then he says, 'I'm not done with you,' and then you're back in the fight." I would love to know the discussions they had for that moment. It's a bold design decision. Did everyone fully get tricked? Everyone thought for sure that they had died and they had to restart
and I
it?
thought there was no way because I was mashing really hard.
Right.
Yeah,
So there's no way I failed that.
I also had I think I was maybe a weirdly like half spoiled on it because I just randomly saw a tweet that it's like that just had a video clip of like Kratos and Thor kind of looking at it, like, oh, look at this. And I basically did not finish reading that tweet, but I think just seeing that thumbnail of the video kind of said, oh, something notable is going to happen in this cutscene. And I didn't see the exact moment, but definitely when like, oh, well, like, why did I die? And then I immediately like, clicked it like, oh, this is a thing. And it wasn't what I expected, but it definitely was. The surprise of that moment was softened by Twitter.
I'm so scared of every time I'm Googling like God of War just to get like screenshots for thumbnails and stuff like that. Because now I just know Google is going to be convinced that I'm all in on God of War stuff. I feel like
even the autofill is scary.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going to Google some Norse mythology stuff just to try and seem cooler and smarter than Jill. But I couldn't, because it's like if I Google anything, it's going to pop up. Well, thank you. Please, I'm no hero. But yeah, is anybody else seeing people? Are you dodging spoilers left and right? Is the internet being cool for y'all at large?
I basically have been trying to avoid Twitter entirely, basically. But yeah, I've definitely caught a couple of like, oh, here's this like clever line exchange, and I'm actually really glad that I didn't see the chest thing with Atreus until after I'd gotten to that part, because I think that was like, okay, that's very cool that they acknowledged that. It's just like, yeah, it's not as easy as it looks to just punch through a chest.
Yeah. Michael Lane says, outside of the very beginning with Freya's chase scene, the first 2 hours up to the fight with Thor is almost parallel with the start of 2018's God of War. Am I crazy by thinking that this is kind of disappointing for them just to mirror it?
Yeah, they're trying to establish like parallelism of like, here's a kind of us trying to do the same thing we were before, and like even from the jump, you know even more so than before. Then it's like, this isn't gonna work. Like, I'm not gonna be here long because for multiple reasons this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I feel like we've and the way that we got the lake really early too. And like we've basically played a lot of God of War 2018 already, and I feel like yes, it would be disappointing, but we'll see. You know what I mean? We'll see more and more and more, and so I feel like we'll have better insight on that as we finish the game. Yeah.
It's setting it up for the comparison, and so a lot of people are saying like, oh, Thor's fight was so much better. Like, I think I like the Baldur fight so much more, but I think a lot of that was still just kind of the surprise of just seeing. That was the first time in 2018's in that game where you realize like, oh, what they're doing with the camera work and how impressive it is when he's flying through the house and all that.
And then like narratively was also kind of a surprise, because you kind of expect this to be the first to beat in like, okay, some random guy is gonna wander in here and Kratos is just gonna be like, I'm a god, don't mess with me, and like when he punches him and it actually, it reveals that he's a god. I think that to me was like the most surprising moment in that game, and it definitely feels like in the first section the game is trying to like figure out how to replicate that, both through like, oh, suddenly Freya, and like, hey, you're going to like, the game is going to fake you out by having you die and then like bring you back to life, right? So it definitely feels like it is trying to replicate that, but at this point it definitely seems like, okay, we've replicated a lot of the beats of the original game now in the first 6 hours. Like, imagine what we're going to do next. And that's sort of where I'm hoping this goes, is that like, here's stuff that you knew before, and now here's kind of like the next iteration on that.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, you shouldn't gloss past that moment when, I think it's like in the last kind of arena place where you're fighting with Thor, and there's kind of the frozen lightning bolt in the middle, and Thor has that moment where he goes, this feels familiar. And then Kratos is like, what? And then Thor's like, don't matter. But seems like they're getting into some fun full circle-y type stuff. So I imagine.
Thank you. I thought that was a reference I missed.
No,
I think you're right.
I think that's Norse mythology full circle thing. I think for sure that's going to be coming back in some way. Miguel Magi. Actually, well, they have a good comment. They just commented about how in the beginning they really love the kind of tag team aspect when Freya's attacking them on the sled, and they hope they see more of that.
What do you mean? Actually, they have a good comment.
Yeah, I know. Can you imagine if
all these
your
other
name
trash ones?
Your name is called out, and then the host is like, "No, that's not good enough."
Because I'm trying to work chronologically, and I had moved on from this chunk, and then I was like, "Well, actually, we should actually go back and honor this one." Miguel,
I do also like that you can basically have that become a combat mechanic where Atreus will follow up when he can. Of like, if he's close to you and you're close to the enemy and you're attacking him, it'll be a thing where you trade hits with him basically, and I think that's a really cool kind of a mechanic.
Yeah.
Like the chase scene too, where they show off like she's kind of an earthy goddess, and like the earth is coming after you.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
It's so cool. Tanner Hoisington actually doesn't blow it and has something smart to say, where they say Brock and I'm just kidding. Thank you everybody for supporting us on Patreon. Tanner says,
Brock, here's our first non-garbage comment of the day.
Finally, somebody with a frickin' brain. Brock and Sindri's home being a candidate for the coziest places in gaming pantheon is not what I would have expected in a God of War game.
I want to go up that staircase so bad.
It is really good. It is such a lovely place. And even like, I love that bit too, where they're outside. I think it's maybe after they're already in there for a while, then go back out. But where Atreus is just like looking over the edge at Yggdrasil, and he's just looking at those weird dragons like eating the tree down there, whatever the hell's happening. It's so cool. I love that environment. Lou Sens writes in and says, using my one comment on Patreon to say I have only known tiny blue mushroom creatures that hang out outside of Sindri's home for 5 minutes, but I would lay down my life to protect any one of them.
Yeah, they're cool.
Yeah, those guys are cool. I hope Atreus turns into one of them. Nugget says, I adored the scene when you first arrive at Sindri's house where Brock comes in and is completely bewildered by how much Atreus has grown. The amount of confusion and disgust in his voice had me laughing out loud. I'm loving the game's humor so far. And then Holden Hintz brings up that Kratos does not want a snack line as well as you're walking into that house.
So good.
Yeah, it's such a good home base. I'm looking forward to coming back to this place over and over again, and I hope we just keep bringing more and more gods on our side and packing them in there.
I chilled out at their meal for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody just eating some weird sausage with knives. I couldn't stop watching.
I like after the prompt to get up as Kratos came out, I wanted to see if like, okay, if you hold on this, will anything happen? And I didn't do it long enough for anything to happen, but I'd be curious to see if any like you can get any bonus lines.
I was there for a long time, long time, and they just kept eating.
That's amazing. Did the sausages diminish?
No.
Okay.
Infinite sausages.
Oh,
Magic.
Nice. It's like Olive Garden. Starkiller writes and it says, I like Brock and Sindri's little Fimbulwinter caps. Yeah, they have good caps. Top-notch caps. Share the load. Justin Dale says, it was the littlest thing, but Sindri telling Kratos to skedaddle had me rolling.
You're rolling.
Rolling, they say.
Absolutely.
Phoenix Rogue says, can we please discuss how amazing Sindri is as a character? Both the writing and the delivery is truly special to me. Each time he pops up, I'm smiling.
Yeah, I wasn't really expecting to get a lot from them. I was just like, okay, they're the creators of things and they're in the background and they are helpful. But like that last sort of jaunt with him and Atreus going through the snow and realizing something big about their past, I'm like, oh, we're getting actual like backstory on what's going on with these two little dwarf friends.
It does also seem like Sindri's definitely outpacing Brock in this game by a larger margin than maybe in the original. It seems like they are leaning a lot harder on Sindri. Well, I mean, obviously there's like the whole him and Atreus working together thing, but I feel like Brock has not had like too many moments to shine by comparison, and I hope he gets something similar.
Yeah, it is weird that Sindri is keeping that whole aspect away from Brock, that he's been going on these secret missions, or at least, it's implied when Brock is so surprised by Atreus going through puberty that it implies that he hasn't seen him for a long time and whatnot.
And it's so great that Sindri is right next to him being like, oh yeah, you look so different. And everybody knows that he's lying through his teeth and nobody breaches the subject.
Right. Yeah, I do love that. Even like, when you come back from the mission and Sindri like sneaks in through the window and then they're coming over to the table and then Sindri like comes out of his room like, bruh, like pretending like he just got out of bed and Kratos just like gives him a look.
As well rested as I am, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Also I like when you're upgrading the blades at a certain point, Sindri says, fire is actually disinfected, so these are very hygienic. It's like, I love those little details. Those are fun.
Do you think we'll resolve the 4 parts of Brock's soul?
Absolutely.
Or is that just going to be... Oh, okay.
Like, you really don't think... Yeah. Somebody, Devin Cheek wrote in about that saying, like, that absolutely sounds like a cool side quest in the future, is like finding the 4th chunk of Brock's soul.
Yeah.
Do you think... Is the implication that that's why Brock is kind of a jerk? Or is that not relevant?
I don't know if that's the implication, but it could definitely I could definitely see the story beat there being like Brock not wanting that. The last part of his soul is like I like who I am. I don't want to know how this would change me because I could be a totally different person.
That's good. You should write video games, Suriel. That's a good idea. I hope they do go that direction.
Well, like one of them is like the thing that takes you to the afterlife or something like that, the direction or something like that, right? Like potentially you could, like, if you die without that chunk of your soul, you're just gone.
Did they talk about that in this section?
They talk about that in a walk, on a walk.
All
right, so I got to divulge everything to this team right here because we agreed to play through the chapter. The next chapter doesn't start until I hear the chapter name. So I played until I now know the next chapter's name. So I have traveled to the next part of the game.
What are
No,
you
I
doing?
stopped at the house.
Yeah, we all stopped where we were supposed to.
There's nothing that says the chapter is over. You know what I mean?
That is. Well, I was even afraid to bring up the table because I wasn't sure, because like I consider a quest done, because like right before then they tell you this quest completed, have started next quest, but there is no explicit screen that tells you that Old Friends is completed. It just kind of completes in the background.
The text pops up. The text pops up and says the next name of the quest. So that was kind of the.
Like that
I guess I was expecting it to be more
start on the next one.
Yeah, it doesn't. There's no like, hey, you've stopped.
Sure.
Like, here is your point of no, which is like a thing. Well, that's just a thing specific.
Look, we're all fine. We're not going to kick you from the call, man. You can hang out, Kyle. Don't worry about it, man. You're cool. Chat's furious. But...
So going forward. What's the name of the next one? It's like
Forging Destinies.
Forging Destinies. Okay.
So
you want me to stop as soon as this quest complete, but not when the next chapter begins?
I mean, yeah. Just don't start the next discussion by just quoting the next lines or something. You know, you're all about to see this redundant conversation about what the 4 parts of the soul actually are. Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. Pope Attitude, which is a very good name, says, how'd y'all feel about the Fimbulwinter as climate change dialogue early in Svartalfheim? Is that part of the mythology or a creation for this game? I love that idea that it's not just Fimbulwinter is a winter in every realm, but it's just drastically changing the weather in all of the realms. That's a really smart idea.
I think it's just for the design so that you're not in every single level.
It is both
white snow. Like
it is like a confluence of like this conveniently allows us to make different environments and happens to be an allegory for climate change. I don't know. I don't think they went into it with that intention necessarily specifically, but I can see that as basically like, oh, this is also this also allows us to do this thing and like during the writing process of like we can tie this all in, and that just happens to be like a nice bit of kismet.
Yeah. E.T. Clark is right with Kyle saying that the Dwarven Village, the pumpkins look amazing. They're the best looking pumpkins in any video games. Next to Pumpkin Jack, of course, who is our hero. Barney Anderson writes in and says, there are a lot of colorful insects in this game. They're kind of neat.
Yes.
They're kind of
They're killing me.
Wait, really?
I hate, like, I literally, anytime I see them, I kill every single one of them, like, obsessively.
Oh,
and
they
I'm
look like a collectible.
Yeah.
Does anything happen when they die? Because first of all, I just don't want this bug near me, so die.
Naturally.
But second of all, I want something to happen. I was like, oh, if I kill every single one of them in this cave, like, something's going to appear. And I think the first time I did it, I just happened to have something that I hadn't picked up yet. So I associated those things happening as like a cause and effect thing. But as I went through and started killing all the bugs, that didn't happen again. So I hate these bugs.
Like a hidden thing those things signify of like these signify the specific, like maybe they're supposed to point you towards a chest or something is what I thought early on. I almost kind of half expect of like there being a small thing of like, hey, you remember all those bugs you keep seeing? This was like the thing going on with them this whole time, because it like they are interactable enough to where it feel like, and they stand out in every environment in a way that like a game design thing would, where it's just like you notice them everywhere you go, but they don't give you anything. So I like. Part of me feels like there will be something, but I could also just it being like maybe at some point it was there, but then they took it out, or like
it just makes it look more interesting.
So, it's someone did a bug pass at some point because they were like mid-production and like, well, I need assets to make. I'm just gonna do this.
I interpreted them as like, the lights along the stairs at a movie theater. They just indicate boundaries. I didn't even think to try to kill the bugs. It's astounding to me that you can. That's so fun.
Oh yeah. Speaking of which,
kill birds too that aren't the Odin's crows, and they just like they very kindly just turn into a thing of feathers.
Yeah, totally. Kyle Dodge writes in and says, "Hey, Ragnarok feels so good to play and looks amazing, but it doesn't feel as buttoned up as God of War 2018. I've run into several bugs with my time so far. Just to connect these bug dots. I have noticed the same thing. It crashed on me, and also my game was flickering." Maybe this is some weird nonsense, but I had it like through different inputs and whatnot, so I don't think it was a weird tech issue that way. But it kept flickering, and I had to uninstall it and reinstall it. It seems okay now, but I've like fallen through the ground. I mean, it's still so damn polished and amazing, but it does feel a little bit more rickety than 2018 for me, at least so far.
I've been manually saving a lot because I've had some inconsistencies with like using the quick resumes thing of it. Sometimes it'll just be at the main menu. One time because it was the game updated, but I definitely feel like one time I just booted my PS4 and it's just a black screen and I had to restart my whole console.
Weird.
Like I haven't really had any problems like that. The only thing was like I saved and it went back to a checkpoint instead of my manual save, but
Yeah, lucky. Fred DeNovo, just to flip back to talking about killing bugs and stuff. Fred DeNovo says, "Great Odin's Raven. Anyone else get an accidental Raven kill? I was in the middle of the first side quest available and hadn't called back my axe for a bit, but when I needed to use it to solve a puzzle, I called for it from far away and suddenly got a trophy for my first Raven kill. I still have no idea where it was, but that's one down, I guess." I love that.
Awesome. Yeah. I've had the reverse of that, where I see it and I'm like, kill, and I keep missing it.
Come on, kill.
Find the mines.
If that's your only Raven kill, you could check where it was, because like the game does keep track of like in this region, here's how many you've killed. So you can at least find the general region where it was.
Do you think, is the axe actually a physical object the entire time? Because I saw some people talking about like, oh, it takes forever for the axe to come back to your hand if you have it far away. And that's true, but I don't think it's 1-to-1. Do you know what I mean? I think it's still like.
Yeah.
I mean, it killed a random Raven, right? So it's hard
I guess.
to know. At some point, it does manifest as a real object in the game at some distance from you, but whether or not like the game remembers its physical location and
that's what I'm doubting.
Accurately tracks it, that seems like probably fudges that a lot.
Right. Drake Hindhorse, by the way, says, "As someone planning on getting the Platinum Trophy, I appreciate how the collectibles are easier to find than God of War 2018. When I 100% the first game earlier this year, when I 100%ed it, I only found 5 Ravens on my blind playthrough of the entire game. After this first section of Ragnarok, I've already found 9 of 13 possible with minimal searching." That's pretty good. 9 of 13 already in the first.
Yeah, that's
7.
definitely more than I've found.
I think some of them aren't possible yet. I think you gotta you need that gas power to go up to that platform. Sorry, I'm just pulling scissors now. You need to go up to this and then like there is a green Raven up there, and it is nice that they're bright green. I agree with that.
Yeah, it was cool. Like in the opening, I think like after the bear scene, when you're running back to the cabin, you can see one of Odin's ravens, not like the green ones, but kind of the story ravens. You can see one in the forest watching you. My name is Dan writes in and says, "It was weird running through," I can't do it either, Nidavellir while it was completely. I'll take it.
Something like that.
The dwarf town while it was completely empty, right? Yeah. You know, it's a little bloodborne.
I mean, all the dwarves are basically hiding from you. It's kind of a Bloodborne situation where everyone's just kind of indoors. So that's definitely the same thing. Real quick, though, I would like to announce that I need a pee-pee poo-poo break.
Are you serious? On air you're saying that, bro?
Oh, my gosh.
What?
All right, pee-pee poo-poo break. Here we go. Kyle, do you know what I think about more often than I'd like to admit, and it still haunts me to this day, is when we were doing the deepest dive on Miles Morales, and you called me out for saying truly the dumbest thing possible, where I think I was just rambling and not in charge of my tongue, and I said something along the lines of like, oh, you know, the question from Spider-Man 2018 was, are Peter Parker and MJ, are they pleased with each other? And then you stopped the whole conversation dead and you said, pleased with each other? I hate that I said that.
Remember that now, I do.
Oh, God, I was hoping you didn't. I was hoping you would never remember it again.
I reminded you? I was hoping that you'd have forgotten, so I brought it up.
I didn't know what else to do, Suriel. I panicked. Remy Bach writes in, by the way, and says, that was totally a Bear McCreary cameo in the tavern in the town, right?
Was it?
Yep. As soon as I heard the hurdy-gurdy, which is the name of that instrument, it took me back to the Black Sails intro, so I looked up a picture of him, and I'm 90% sure it's the composer of the game as that first dwarf that you talked to in the town.
For sure.
Just got a nomination for the Grammys, I believe.
Oh, really?
Not for this game, I don't think, but...
Yeah,
for Call of Duty, he was nominated, actually.
Isn't that the
For Vanguard. For Call of Duty Vanguard,
really?
He's nominated, yeah.
Weird. Yeah, he also composed Rings of Power, the TV show. So, like, he has had a wild year. Yeah, what do y'all think of the music so far? Nobody wrote in about it, which is surprising.
I think
it's just so, like, perfectly epic.
Okay.
It's, like, not something that stands out.
It's too perfect.
Exactly.
I think the one time I really noticed the music was at the end when you take on the role of Atreus, when the camera shifts to him, and it turns into the like. I think it is still like the same motif, but it's like the very like, oh, we're going on a caper, like kind of like the plex of like those kinds of like very mystery, mischief is going on kind of twangs. That was like the most noticeable like standout musical moment for me because it felt like such a oh, we're doing this now. That I think that was almost probably what caused me to think like, oh, this is going to be a whole thing, not just a scene.
Yep, the Trey stuff, that's when it stuck out to me too. The fact that like, oh, he has his own battle theme and it sounds so different and so cool. Like that's the first piece of music that really hit me over the head, I think. Andrew B writes in and says, imagine my surprise when I found a door in Svartalfheim that the chisel unlocks. What secrets lay in wait? A super mini-boss? More lore about Odin or the Valkyries? No, it's a chest. Somehow the most disappointing loot in the game thus far, only because of my own expectations based off the previous game. Has anyone else experienced the game subverting expectations in a similar way by using old signposts from the previous game?
The chisel unlocks?
Yeah, remember in the first game, it's like one of the later things you get, right?
Oh, it's like a little wall of ice, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I was not disappointed at all. That was cool.
Yeah, I missed that, I think. Jimothy writes in and says, after getting locked into the boat ride down the mines, I was internally screaming, let me stop here, while passing collectibles and explorable areas. Tight corridors and boat rides will remain a hallmark of this generation's loading screens. Yeah, that's a pretty entertaining one. Yeah, that was another one where I just was thinking too much about the camera, because it is such a wild idea of like to have this mission where you're kind of going deeper and deeper into the mines. It's like, we need to get back out of here somehow. You can't just cut to be like, good adventure, moving on to the next thing. Like if you're going into a dungeon, you need to then show going back from the dungeon. And I think in that case, it's like there's kind of an elevator that brings you back up, but it's a really weird design problem for them to solve. Christian,
that's interesting. You're thinking about the parameters of and like what might happen a lot as you're playing the game. It sounds like.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, aren't you trying to?
It sounds like you're thinking about what happens next. As even like when you're in, what's happening now.
Are you saying I'm not able to live in the moment and enjoy what I'm experiencing?
I'm saying I do that a lot. It's just kind of like non-critically, just I am in that little log that's just kind of like flowing me through, and I'm like, wow. And sometimes I think that's like a non-intelligent way to like critique things, you know?
Right.
And so yeah, I think that's interesting. Is that no, I would not even like think about as I'm going into this mine, oh boy, how do we get out of here? I'm just, like, where's Tyr?
Yeah, I mean, people even called that out on the Twitch stream because I take so many stupid notes while playing this game that people are like, you are ruining this game for yourself because you're pausing it every 40 seconds to write down something stupid. Like, Heimdall is a true believer. Had Galahorn. Like, that's probably not going to come up in this discussion, but it's like,
I mean,
it will.
Well, I think for me, note taking, a lot of times I will never reference notes that I write, but it's more about like the process of writing them down kind of better embeds them in my memory.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's less about the utility of the notes and more like the process of doing it. But I'm definitely like terrible at like figuring out what's going to happen next. Like I'm terrible at like, oh, if there's a murder mystery, I will actively not even try to solve the actual crime. I'll just let the detectives in the story do the work.
That's right.
And that, like I don't make the assertions of like, oh, that guy did it. Like the second I see it, I'm just kind of involved enough in what's going on that like I never have time to predict what's going to happen because like I just want to see how they unfold. I'm not interested in figuring it out before they do.
So like when you're watching Dora the Explorer and she's asking you to say words and
which I do all the time.
Yeah, you just like sit back and you're like, you got this one, Dora. I'm not going to say that word out loud.
Yeah.
Smart.
I think it's a uniquely sort of journalistic problem because I didn't do this before jumping into this media industry, and it is a very different experience when you stop every 2 seconds to like write down like, oh, this is going to be so important. I need to get the details right. And when I start writing for the article that I'm going to write, even if I'm not writing an article. So for something like this, where I'm just going to talk, I start putting in like, make sure to use this word because that's a good word to use. Like, oh, it's not necessary.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who doesn't really need to do that as much, I still find myself having that internal note take of like, make note of this, and like having that process be part of how you enjoy something is a hard habit to break.
Yeah. We're all cursed. Adam Moran says, it was really surprising how timid and fearful Tyr is after being held captive for so long. I also loved how despite his demeanor, he still managed to feel intimidating when he finally gets to his feet and towers over Kratos. Oh, that is such a good moment of like, God, is he growing? Like he's just suddenly you realize how actually huge Tyr is.
It is like, I think one of my favorite moments is that like he is crouched and like very small the first time, and then like you realize that he is much taller than Kratos when Kratos lifts him up and says like, you need to get your act together, right? And like this, and also like, this is how big you are. Tyr's role so far is being like the like he's literally a mirror for Kratos, right? The God of War in there, and like seeing how like, well, Kratos' whole thing is I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to be the God of War anymore. And he feels like this parallel of like, this is maybe going a little bit too far in the direction of passivity, of like just basically cowed into like, what's it called? Learned helplessness versus like understanding, you know, the concept of picking your battles versus he has been completely cowed into like, I don't want to fight anymore because I understand myself well enough to know that there is a bad version of myself that fights. But like the idea of like, there are some things that you do have to fight for it, and Kratos having that internal struggle and him representing like, this is one end of the spectrum that you can go too far.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised of, you know, hundreds and hundreds of comments. We got like 2 on Tyr. Where like Tyr, I think, is my favorite character so far in the game. I love that approach of just having this quiet, meek guy. And it's just, you know, it's easy catnip because, you know, at some point he's going to pop and he's going to pop hard. He's going to kick ass, right? Like there's no way the story isn't building to that.
And he's going to signify it by saying, I'm about to pop.
right. Tyr style.
People are going to hate that.
So there's one point where he said like, I can't engage in violence even if I wish to, or something like that. I think that's his line. Even if I wish to is how it ended. Like there's some implication that like he's nerfed right now, that like there's some sort of curse on him or something. I get the impression of.
It's either that or like he has been in captivity for so long that he's like basically
I think it's a psychological thing.
Yeah.
I really like that scene too of him standing up, because that was in trailers and stuff, and the implication being that like they're about to throw down.
Yep.
And to have that totally subverted is just fantastic.
Yeah, that was one thing. It's such a minor spoiler, but I was such on red alert. But there was some PlayStation blog article or some video, and I was just trying to get a screen grab from there real quick for a thumbnail, and it was about like designing enemies or some nonsense like that, and they had a clip of everybody sitting around the dinner table with Tyr. I was like, damn it, I wish I didn't see that.
Oh,
like,
bummer.
Yeah.
Dang.
It's just something that is so innocent, but
it's also a really good showing of where Loki is right now. Atreus, Loki?
Yeah.
Of like, you wanted me just to further your own like war ambitions. That's really all I was to you. And like, he's not even pretending like he cares that he saved a life, or that, you know, any of the justifications he gave his father for trying to find Tyr just crumble as soon as Tyr's not able to fight. And it's like, no, I had no human concern for this other person's life. I literally just wanted him to further my ambitions, and he wasn't able to accomplish that, and so he is useless. And it's like, wow, that's a hard line to take there, Atreus. Like, what are you up to?
Yeah, and now Kratos and Mimir might be the ones that are like, no, he might be good. He might be good. Yeah, he's still useful, I swear. Yeah, I guess we kind of glossed over the and no one wrote in about it, which is interesting as well. But like the vision that Atreus saw of going through the giant's door and kind of that gold room and seeing, oh, here's exactly what's going to happen with the wolves. And there's, how does he phrase it? He's like, some mysterious figure steals the moon, and it's like somebody wearing a helmet that you don't even see. I'm really curious to see where that goes. And then it's the vision of, all right, this is Tyr actually leading the battle against Odin, which is interesting. Just thinking about like, okay, no Kratos or Atreus in that mural, at least. What does that mean?
Right. And like, what is the margin for error here? Like, how much are we supposed to understand that Atreus has not understood what he has seen? Because like in mythology, like the person who leads is Loki. It's not Tyr. So like, is he seeing himself leading the war against the gods and does not recognize himself yet?
Oh, that's interesting. It's like the tall guy with the spear. Like he's going to pick up Tyr's spear.
Something
the spear
like
of
that,
Tyr.
yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Sure.
And I love that line too, where I think Mimir said, like, is this in the past or is this going to happen? And then Loki says something like, well, it depends on which angle you're looking at it from, or something like that. And he's like, spoken like a true giant. But Sam Danby writes in and says, all the characters seem to think Tyr has lost his mind, but I loved how calmly he was able to explain his issues to Atreus when he calmly says, I'm sorry I ran. I don't always know what's real. I'm enthralled by Tyr so far. Okay, thank you, Sam. I'm glad you're also loving Tyr.
And he says, you can all hear Mimir talking too?
Right.
Good moment.
Yeah. Yeah, what he has that line too, where he says, "All I ask for is a good night's rest and maybe some food. I think you killed the guards bringing me dinner." Like, it's just a simple man. He just wants to sleep in his tiny little bed, and like, doesn't he ask for like a closet when he gets back to the house?
Yeah, he says he'd only be comfortable in a broom closet because he's been in captivity for so long.
Right, right.
Man, I kind of like it. It's like these characters are like, this man has experienced trauma, so it's like, treat him that way. You know what I mean? That's the way he's written, and it's not like he's just like, oh, I'm good now. Let's go fight. You know what I mean? Like, it's written with a certain responsibility of like, oh, that would affect a human or a god even, and so like, let's write him that way. I really like that.
Yeah. Mark Varley writes in and says, "Who expected the War Boys to join the fight?" These are the, I can't pronounce it right, I'm sorry, but the Einarjar. Einarjar. Kind of Odin's goons, the one that put the Bifrost on your health bar.
Yeah.
They're called the War Boys?
No, but they look like the War Boys from Mad Max, I think is what Mark's going for here.
Got it.
They have a similar look, which is weird because Cory Barlog worked on the Mad Max game, or a version of the Mad Max game, so he knows George Miller. But yeah, those guys are cool. I thought that was a really interesting mechanic of like, oh yeah, so you can have Bifrost on your health bar, and if they hit you while you have that, you'll lose all that. It feels kind of like a fighting game mechanic or something, Suriel. I know you like those.
I do. Yeah, it definitely is like the gray health, I think is what it's called, where it's like if you, it is like a lot higher damage, but only if you are hit again. So it's like the thing of like, oh, it's kind of like the be careful thing that I was kind of hoping they would have in the rest of the game, where it otherwise feels like either you are totally fine or you are about to die. So this feels like, okay, like be on guard when you're fighting these guys.
Yeah. Sorry, I guess I swapped these around, but Adam Dillinger says, "I'm loving the extra lore and backstory they've added since the first game, such as Mimir's tragic history with the dwarves. Along with deepening him as a character and also showing us Odin's lingering oppression of the realms, it led to the best side quest of the game. He's so much more than just a talking head." And then Joran writes in about that stuff as well. He says, "While exploring the Dwarven city, Mimir commented on how Odin ruined the dwarves' agriculture in order to peddle his own Aesir goods. It really struck me as it was a tactic used by the British East Indian Company to dominate and conquer India. It's estimated that 30 to 60 million Indian people died from conflict and famine directly caused by the East Indian Company." Yeah, interesting if they thought that was a reference as well. Joshua Dupe Roy says, "At the end of the Lingbacher quest, when it's, by the way, I can't pronounce it. It's not helping by slowing down and leaning into a bad pronunciation. It's not like one of these times we're going to nail it and everybody in Scandinavia is going to be like, whoa, way to go." Right. Anyways, at the end of the Lingbacher quest, when it's revealed that the whale no longer possesses the will to escape and is simply grateful to feel the wind on its face, Mimir responds by shouting, "That's not enough," to which Kratos responds, "It seldom is." This line, coupled with the music in the moment, really got me. That whale quest, that was one where I was streaming it and everyone's like, you need to make sure you do the side stuff, make sure you do the side stuff. And so I was doing like the smokestack stuff with Mimir. I was like, this is fine. I don't really get it. But the fact that whale thing is optional is truly wild. It's huge. It's amazing. Who didn't get the whale?
I didn't see it at all.
See the whale, yeah.
Imagine the biggest object you've ever seen in the video game sitting in the water, and you have to go around and free this whale. And then, yeah, it's really beautiful. Kyle, what'd you think about the big old whale?
Love the old whale. Yeah, there's a lot of like platforming and puzzle solving you do on the whale's back and its fins. And I think it's there more to reinforce Mimir's regret. It's Mimir's fault that this whale is chained. And also that there's no simple just feeling better for it kind of thing. Is like you free the whale, but the whale stays because it has collectibles on its back and it can't go away forever. So like Mimir is not, absolved. And it's like, yeah, you made a mistake and like you made it a little better, but like you've not repented completely.
And they tied in thematically with that idea of you're like freeing the chains and taking the chains off of the whale, but Kratos is like, yeah, even if you take the chains off, like he's still imprisoned. It's not like he's completely free now. So they're trying to connect it to Kratos' past as well with that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole, there is a line when you're about to leave where Mimir is like, well, I'd like to, or what was it? I'd like to climb a tree again, but it's like some like no matter how much you want to atone for crimes, like certain things, it's like damage is done. Like you have to. It's like a combination of learning to accept that something like that you cannot. Like the ideal is not reversing the wrong. It is atoning for it and learning to live with having done something bad. There's no like absolving yourself completely of guilt.
Yeah. I wrote down a line that I liked when the armored guys pop up for the first time and you go in to fight him. Mimir just says, "I'm about to get knocked around a bunch, aren't I?" This is good. Mimir's funny, everybody. Jeremy L. writes in, he says, "I think I preferred playing as Atreus to Kratos. And B-Done 912 is kind of in that same camp. I actually like controlling him in combat a lot more than they thought." Yeah, I was worried when you first take control of Atreus and you're kind of doing the crouch thing. I was like, is he going to kind of be just stealthing around? But then when you actually get into combat, it's like, oh, now I feel like he's been faking it in the other combat with Kratos. He could be helping out so much more. He's amazing.
Yeah, and you can unlock some of the stuff that he does when you play as him as assists. So like he has a grappling hook that attaches himself to enemies, and so like so far I kind of agree with the idea that I think I like playing as him more. But a lot of it is that like he has such a different style that it feels like the freshest gameplay that you have in this game, of like the more like almost shooter-ish like centric gameplay of like you're constantly just filling people with arrows. And I also like just having the fact that Sindri is like every once in a while I'll be able to throw a bomb at people.
Yeah, I think I always like in games, if I have the choice of playing the archer character, like that's the person I gravitate towards. So I think that's a big part of why I really like Atreus and his style of gameplay. And then just not thinking that we were going to get it as early as we did. I thought we would play as Atreus at some point, but the fact that we can play him in the first third, and like my theories on what's going to happen and what would make us play later hasn't happened. So it's just like a fun time to play as him. So I'm super down for more Atreus time.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought that in the future of the series we're going to be playing as Atreus. I feel like Huber, Kyle over at Easy Allies, he's been teasing a lot. Like I know where they're going next for the God of War franchise, but he won't say because he thinks it's a spoiler. But I think if I had to guess, what he thinks is that like they're going to call the next game God of Mischief or something, and like the main character is Atreus. That'll be my prediction for him.
None of Huber's predictions ever become true.
Really? Oh, he's cursed.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, it's good to know.
It's like the opposite of Cassandra, where everyone believes him, but none of his things are true.
That's exactly it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Chris Quick writes in and says, "I want to call out what a fantastic job both games have done with Atreus. He wasn't an annoying companion in the first game, and playing as him in Ragnarok just feels as good as playing Kratos. Both decisions were extremely bold and have paid off in such a fun and satisfying way so far, at least." Kyle, you digging Atreus, or you're not that into it?
Yeah, to me, it's like the achievement is not annoying. Right?
Right.
Like that easily, there are 10,000 ways that could have been annoying, and they avoided all of them. They somehow made playing as Atreus not annoying. I didn't really appreciate that at the time.
Yeah.
Except for the part where they actively want him to be annoying. Like the first, like when he first kills someone, he's like, he finds out he's a god, and he's kind of, he actively becomes a dick. And there's also like an exchange in this game where he tells Kratos to knock it off. And then like he has this whole conversation of like, look, you can disagree with me. You are basically taking the lead on this quest, but you will not speak to me that way. Like you would like, just because you are the leader does not mean you get to tell me whatever you want. I am still your father.
Yeah.
I ended up actually like really liking that exchange a lot.
Yeah. I liked there's a moment too where they're on the quest arguing. There's some moment where Atreus just tells Kratos like, yeah, tell your tone or something, because Kratos is like, I'm not lecturing you or something. He's like, yeah, well,
he says, I'm not blaming you for anything.
Right.
It's like, tell your tone that. I loved that line.
Yeah, and there's the other line too where Kratos is trying to talk to Atreus, and he's like, am I annoying you? Or like, are my basic quest frustrating you? And then I think that was the point where Ramirez had to jump in and be like, hey, boys, brothers, as he says. Matt Lowry. Oh, by the way, the brothers thing. I was trying to remember, since you just played 2018's God of War, does Mimir take a while before he starts whipping out the brother as a term of endearment for Kratos? Or is it right out of the gate, is he calling everybody brother?
I think it's pretty quick. I don't remember his first brother being like a huge deal.
Okay.
I think it's just like a pretty common term of affection for him.
Okay. Yeah, Lewis K writes in and says, Kratos' characterization is so much more enjoyable in this game. Him calling Mimir brother really stands out, and then him and Kratos both telling Atreus for screaming swear words top of his lungs in the minecart was very funny.
It's so sweet how Kratos places Mimir on that dinner table,
Yeah.
He like rotates him a little bit. That's like there's a true bond there. There's true love.
He's had to manage this head like it's this little Tamagotchi for so long, and like he probably set him up for like he has that little stand in the beginning where you can read the book, and like he has a spoon in his mouth to like turn the pages and stuff.
Yeah.
Andrew left,
but at the same time, he treats Mimir like an equal.
Yeah.
He's never like, come on, head. You know what I mean? Like that's the easy way to go. But no, there's like true love and respect there. It's great.
Yeah. Andrew Left says, I really enjoy seeing Kratos get mad in this game, but holding his anger. Early on in the game, when Atreus tells Kratos that he's been visiting the shrines with Sindri, you see Kratos close his eyes, take a deep breath, and clench his fists. Then after a couple seconds, he calmly responds. It's as if Kratos has been taking anger management and is practicing some useful exercises to stay calm, and I love it.
I think that's interesting because I think part of what Kratos believes is what he needs to do to be a better person is to control his anger. And he is taking that personal goal and sticking it onto his son as like, that's what everyone needs to do to be better. Whereas I think that's really holding back Atreus and not at all what Atreus needs to be doing. So I think there's a really interesting thing there with Kratos not like he's moved past a certain like emotional intelligence to say like, yes, I need to acknowledge that I'm grieving. Yes, I need to acknowledge that I'm angry and say like, okay, we don't need to be angry about this. But he's still not quite at that level where he can look at his son and be like, my son's a man, a human being separate from me with his own path and his own way to go. And I need to let him do his thing and figure out what's really best for him versus what's best for me is best for everybody.
That's very well said. I think that's probably going to be some themes they're going to probably lean into more and more throughout the game. Yeah.
There is that other, like, to go back to what I mentioned about, like, you know, that progress not being linear. There's that moment where he gets back from his whole thing and he's like, Kratos asks him, where have you been? And he just says peeing. And there's definitely like this sense of Kratos, I would imagine probably knows it's a lie, but he is choosing to believe him, or like, we will have this conversation later.
Totally.
But like for now, I am choosing to let this particular thing lie in a way that feels like, okay, there's some upcoming tension going to happen. But for now, like, sure, I believe you, but I'm gonna ask about this later.
This is probably a stretch, so please forgive me. Because the big thing was when Atreus turns into the bear, he doesn't remember how or why it happened, and then the bear was the one that took down the big old force field around the house. Do you think there's anything with like Odin triggering that, or was it just a coincidence?
I mean, it would tie into his like, I have a plan for Loki, so maybe there's like a thing where like, you know, the second you like he has somehow been manipulating him behind the scenes, and like maybe the coin reinforced that as soon as he touched it or something. I could see that being the case, but right now I would lean towards no. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
Yeah,
it was the mama. He was fighting the mama bear.
He was. Yeah, he said that he saw the other bear, and that's when he turned into it. That's like the last thing he remembered. So.
Do you think Odin shoved that mama bear into Atreus?
That's exactly what I think, and I have sketches to prove it.
We didn't talk about this, but that's a really like a really good moment of like Atreus realizing that his actions have consequences. Sure. Of just like he is so in tune with like animals and he cares so much about them, and the fact that not only did he kill this creature out of rage that he was like out of his control essentially, but now these two cubs have to now die because he did what he did.
Right.
And the fact that like they don't even try to like, I thought maybe Atreus would try to bring them home and like hide them in with the wolves or whatever, but the fact that he like accepts that as the consequences of his actions and there's nothing he can really do to change that is heartbreaking.
I think he asks like, what can we do? And Mimir just is like, nothing. We just let nature take its course. Like this is not a thing we can fix.
Right, and Kratos has a line that Tanner Wine wrote in about, which is, intent does not matter, only consequences, in that moment there.
Stuff.
Matt Lowry writes in and says, as Atreus, did anyone else try to aim at that glowing metal stuff and press square, only to have Sindri say, what are you looking at me for? That's really good.
That's cute.
I love they put that in there. Tim O'Keefe says, I just wanted to mention how cool that frozen lightning looks in Midgard. Chef's kiss.
We'll see more, apparently.
I think we're going to. Danny Yorkus says, Vegisaurus, Lex, Vegisaurus. I love the Jurassic Park moment when Jormungandr spits all over Sindri. I'm locking this in as Hansen's game of the year because that happened. Yep. Big fan of big things spitting. Garrett Hullfish says, well, hang on. We shouldn't gloss over that Jormungandr stuff. That seems very important.
That was a cool moment, man. That thing felt huge.
Yeah.
It felt huge.
It felt bigger than last time. And I don't know if they just added more screen shake every time it talks or just that my speakers were better this time around or what. But it is so incredible every time it's slowly saying. Apparently the word ironwood is like all it said.
Jill, do you know what ironwood is?
I have no idea what ironwood is.
Ooh, interesting.
So we'll see.
I love that.
But the fact that like he came up from his nap just to say like one word, he's like, I can't be bothered to tell you everything.
Right,
I love it.
He's been.
I feel like he laughed a little bit too.
Stupid mortal.
Garrett Hullfish says, I absolutely loved Atreus talking to himself as Kratos, complete with making his voice deeper. He originally mocked his father's lessons, but ends up learning from the advice. Yeah, I feel like we've touched on it a couple times, but it is that idea that Kyle was talking about just the game being so kind of empathetic to everybody's perspective, and I think that was a really good example of that. Wes Bates says, does anybody feel that Atreus is overconfident up to the point in this game, like sneaking off on a dangerous mission without telling Kratos? And the Musky Goron says, I think the game is doing a really good job of showing how Atreus is maturing, but is still very naive in a lot of ways. On his way to meet Freya, he very casually says, I'm so dead, which to me shows he hasn't either really considered the possibility of Freya attacking him, or he doesn't understand the finality and impact that dying could have on those around him. I think that's right. Yeah, I mean, I was in the camp of screaming at the TV, like, what are you doing? This is the worst idea. She literally just tried to kill you and your dad like a couple hours back. But then I did like he had that line to try and justify it a little bit of like, look, it's Ragnarok. Like, this is the end of the world. We might as well try to get some more info and try to make some stuff happen here. We're all dead anyway, which justified it a little bit more.
I think some of it is naivety and like the when you're a kid, you feel impervious to everything. Like obviously death happens, but it doesn't happen to me. But also I think some of it is consequences of Kratos' holding on too tightly and letting his frustration grow in a way that he has no vent for. So he's like, I know I need to be something. I know I need to do something. I know that Loki is supposed to be this thing, and no one's allowing me to do that in any real way. So I feel the need to run off and do these things because no one is listening to me. And I think if Kratos was just like, yeah, you're growing up and you are a god and we have destinies of a sort and something big is happening, like let's look into it. If he was a little more like, I think Mimir says something like walk along the path with him.
Right.
So he doesn't walk away from you. Like if Kratos could get that through his dumb thick skull, like we wouldn't see some of the like things that Atreus is doing. So yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous for him to walk in there and not think that it would be kind of poetic justice for Freya to kill his like Kratos' son in retribution for her son being killed.
And yeah, there's that moment too where he's like, why do you have Sindra's like, why do you have the murder weapon for Baldur around your neck? And he says, oh God, what is the line that he has there?
Makes him feel stronger?
Yeah, or he's like, he makes me a better person. And then Sindra's like, you need a
reminder. It's a reminder to be better.
That's right. Yeah. And then Sindri says, you need a murder weapon to be a better person? Yeah. It was, I mean, that has to come back in some way, the fact that Freya grabbed it. I don't know exactly how that's going to tie back to
It wouldn't have
stuff.
So much attention otherwise, no doubt.
Yeah. Wriggles, by the way, writes in and says, hey, Wriggles is here, everybody.
Hey, Wriggles.
Hello, everyone. He says, I love one small difference from the first game to this one. In the first game, the story missions were called The Journey. In Ragnarok, the story missions are called The Path. It gives a real sense that while the first game was open and full of promise, the game has only one direction it can go as Atreus leads this journey and Kratos follows his son's path. This is shown as Atreus will lead Kratos towards the goal in the game where the last time he only followed. That is interesting.
It's a little bear paw, too.
Yeah. By the way, replaying that bear fight, it is funny because like Kratos comes out of the cave, he's in the opening, he's like, Atreus, where are you? And then just then is when the bear attacks. Like they really make it jokey. We got more. Dennis M. Did you throw the snowball at Sindri?
Yeah.
Yes. Did you not, Suriel?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. I want to see that ratio, like a telltale percentage at the end.
A test of like psychopaths. Like
Yeah, who's going to not throw a snowball? Come on.
Yeah, 100%.
Terrence Lang says, can we get a shout out to Danielle Basutti for her devastating portrayal and range for Freya? Easily my favorite character of this God of War reinvention and arguably has the most compelling arc. Yeah, I mean, that performance was fantastic. And just the fact that like her eyes were so wild in Midgard when you get to see her. And the fact that like she's not even following Atreus around the room. Her eyes are just kind of locked forward to a way that if it was a lower budget game, I would blame it being a, animation quirk, but the fact that everything else is such high fidelity, it's like a very deliberate choice to have her eyes be locked straight forward in this kind of 1,000-yard stare almost.
Yeah, and then the performance has to do the work of like, here's this character who like is very easy to see is kind of like wild and out of control, and then your job is to make us empathize with her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Justin writes in and says, after that last quest, what do you think Sindri's nickname for Atreus should be? It's Trey and Loke. I didn't mind Loke. I think that's fine.
Okay.
Why? What do you think?
We
Joe?
did it.
Yeah.
Us?
I don't think he gets to be that familiar. Atreus is a god. I would be like, man, you got to use my full name.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Steven Zarilli says, the running gag about Sindri and cleanliness wears a little thin until he tells Atreus the story of rescuing Brock, which tied it to him physically and emotionally. My jaw legit dropped at that moment. I'm trying to remember. What was the connection again?
I want to stop you though, just because I want to shout out Reckless Fire 94, who gifted 20 tier 1.
Jeez! On Twitch.
Hey.
Thank you, Reckless Fire. Reckless indeed.
Reckless Fire.
Okay, so I guess
No, I missed that too. I missed that connection.
he was
Is it
kind
like a
of,
guilt thing? He feels.
I think so. He was disgusted by something, and that's why he didn't save
I think
him.
he's like, he was dead. So, and like, I felt I just did not want to be alone enough that I basically revived him, and we were shunned by the other dwarves because you're not supposed to do that. Like, you're supposed to, like, death should be permanent. You shouldn't bring people back from the dead.
Oh, okay. So Nemo says in the lake he was getting grabbed by stuff, and that's why he wasn't able to get all 4 souls or something. And with him,
Because it's like the
freak.
hands that come out of like the dead realm.
Okay.
Got it. And that feeling perpetuated. Got it.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I agree with the top of the comment. It's like sometimes it's a little tough to believe, right? When they're like walking in, and he's like, "Oh, it's so dirty. You just walked in with your dirty feet." I'm like, "Okay, bro."
Right.
It's like you have stone floors. But yeah, I like that. There's a little narrative justification for it.
Yeah. Kalel Pryor says, having your stick input make Kratos get up from the table after the Atreus part, after you just did a whole quest as Atreus, was delightful. It made me giggle. The smooth change in possession is a uniquely video gamey surprise. Yeah, I mean, I doubt it's ever been done before of having the no-cut camera and transition between characters. I can't imagine. So it's like that's a tough.
It's not exactly the thing, but there's like in Soma there's kind of a similar thing.
Oh yeah, okay. Save that for the deepest dive on Soma, which I do want to do someday.
Call out like video games are a unique medium in general, just because you have that interaction.
Yeah, and have that shock and surprise of like, oh, now I'm controlling him. Mark Varley says the violence has been notched up a bit in this game. Some of the finishers are lip-smackingly brutal.
I hate that combination of words.
Lip-smackingly beautiful. What do you mean?
Ask Mark. They're a maniac. They're smacking lips watching this
smacking
nonsense.
their lips.
I don't know.
Just somebody to the jaw and then just somebody going.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Nate Miller writes in with we're getting to the key stuff here. Nate Miller writes in and says, very quick and simple question. Is there a more satisfying container opening animation in any game that is better than Kratos punching through those chests? I love it every time.
I'm sorry.
Up there.
I want to go back one because I realize these are all your patrons who have only one question, and then I just mocked the lip smacking portion of that comment.
But yes, it is violent, Mark. Has that stood out to y'all?
But I don't think it's more violent. I think
the
series
so far,
is known for its violence.
nothing has topped in the original game where there's like that huge kind of bear-like enemy where you just grab it by the chest and peel off its skin.
Oh God!
I think that to me is like the most egregious one. So I haven't seen anything that is at that point. There's the one where he stabs like that one giant kind of like, it's like one of the bigger guys, and he just like goes in and stabs them multiple times in quick succession. And then I think if it's like a finisher that kills, it just chops off its head.
It seems like more efficient, right? It's not like I'm going to kill a Cyclops by taking its eyeball out. It's like, I'm going to kill this thing as quickly as I possibly can.
Right. Even like him taking the axe to Thor's stomach in that fight, that really grossed me out. We're just like, oh, now it's just this huge slice in Thor's stomach. It's like, ugh. Axes, no good. But yeah, Nate, the container opening animation for the chest, I don't know, is anything top it? I mean, Zelda, you have the chime, but it gets rote, dare I say it.
And there's the one in Ninja Gaiden where he's just kicking open every chest he sees with his one foot, and it's like a really quick animation of just like, I'm not gonna bother like grabbing the lid or opening it. At the time, it definitely felt like, oh, he's just kicking these things.
Yeah.
But that was like 2004. I think this is definitely a lot more involved.
Yeah.
I know I'm gonna walk away and have like 20 examples of really cool container openings, but I just don't have it at the top of my head.
Well, if Twitch can't come up with it, then we can't be blamed either.
I think it might be number one. It might be legitimately number one.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's like gacha games where it's like the animation is super elaborate, where it's like the Overwatch, like here's Overwatch. This giant elaborate thing where everything explodes and it's all nice and shiny.
Oh, imagine if that was a loot box though. That's the lethal combo. If they ever have the loot box of Kratos popping those things open, good lord. Mark Andre Dufrenzy, are loot boxes legal anymore? Are those just gone forever?
I think they're fallen out of favor a little bit, but there are games where they just tell you the odds a little bit more often.
Is that what it is?
I think they're suboptimal in terms of monetization now.
Oh, really?
Free-to-play games have found out how to make more money than with loot boxes, you know?
Oh, really? They weren't scared of Daddy Law coming down?
I'm sure part of it was like, hey, we can't get away with this anymore, so let's find an even better method. And it seems like gacha has kind of emerged as one of those, but I'm not super privy as to like what the new hotness is in terms of player monetization.
Yeah, it's skins for your cards or whatever in Marvel Snap. Kyle, genuine tension watching your delayed input episode about Marvel Snap and whether or not you're going to leave
Why, do you
account.
have his Marvel Snap account?
I don't. I started it and I did not even get that far. And I was like, nope. And then just all I see is everyone talking about how addicting it is. Just one of those things of like, why would I start this? Why would I start this?
Start. I'm like, if I start this game and I get like sucked in and I can't run the indie website, like that would be the end of everything. So I'm afraid.
The end of everything. But yeah, have you hover over that about whether I'm going to delete your account? I didn't think you were going to do it. I thought you were going to chicken out, so I loved it. I love what you did, man.
Thanks.
Mark Andre Dufresne says, I had a good laugh at Atreus trying to punch through a chest like Kratos and Sindri calling him out. Overall, a lot of funny moments. Absolutely.
The number one comment.
Mark kicked it off, and then everybody followed his lead. David Dubbs says, how messed up is it that Kratos just straight up destroys most chests? They don't look locked. Why not just open it?
Yeah, for real. No, this is a thing uniquely to me, and I get made fun of a lot by my spouse. Having been like an art history person and a history person, I don't like to destroy artifacts that are lying around that are like meant to be destroyed.
Right.
I'm like, no, the pottery, like that's a really important artifact of this time and you can't do it. So the fact that he kind of destroys these wonderfully sort of made chests is every time a little bit like, but it's very satisfying.
On the flip side, for like the larger chests, he only takes the one thing. He takes like a pouch, even though there's a bunch of other stuff in there.
That's true. He's efficient. Clayton Myers says, I feel awful every time Kratos opens the chest in Brock and Sindri's shop by flinging the heavy stone lid on the floor. Those two spend all their time sneaking around, picking up the loot he leaves behind. The least he could do is help them get the thing back on. That is a good point. That must be very annoying.
Yeah. Super rude.
Bo writes in and says, I wish Atreus would pick up the resources and throw them to me. Let me play catch with my son. Yeah, that would be nice. It's kind of like a little BioShock Infinite thing. Charles Davis.
Proper reference.
Really? Well, yeah. Randy told me to say it. Old Rand dog. Charles says, it's the subtleties in the performances and animation that are making this game so next-gen levels of richness for me. There are too many to count already, but here's a few highlights for me. Kratos proudly smiling after Atreus picks up the deer in the beginning. The way Sindri runs is amazing. The eyes and fins of the whale. The little kraken spitting on the scroll. Mwah, chef's kiss. Bellissimo, Charles says. Absolutely. They know what they're doing over there. Although, maybe not. Matthew King writes in and says, for all the impressive animation work, it's disappointing that Kratos has only one death animation. It's just him lying flat on his back every time.
And everybody's like, get up.
Dying much, so.
That's right. Yeah.
What do they mean?
When he dies, he's always just kind of like lying back. I think they want,
Is the implication here, Kyle, that you've never died?
No. I've died many times. I really have died many times. But like, I would. That's my expectation would be a flop.
Right.
I wouldn't like.
Well, I think
I don't know what I need from Kratos there.
Well, maybe like custom death of like, okay, if you die from Thor, then you get Mjolnir like crushing your skull,
like Tomb Raider style.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to see Kratos doing that. You don't want to see him jumping or getting impaled. And those are the rules. And
like enemies like eating him or something like that in particular.
Help me, Atreus, they're eating me. Yeah, no one wants that.
I get it.
Jeffem's Backlog is the name here. They say, Ragnarok has been cracking me up so far. Seems like every character can deliver a laugh. It reminds me of Mad Men in that way. It's a drama that happens to be funnier than most comedies. I hope this continues, even though I expect the game to take a darker turn eventually. Yeah, I wonder as it gets more serious if they're going to up the comedy at the same time, though.
I hope the comedy stays. But does that sound a little bit like a Mad Men, like a marketing person was like, we need to get that name out into the atmosphere again?
That was a Ben Hansen-esque analogy where it's like, that's the one you pick?
Yeah, from now on for the Diva stuff, I need you to let me know if my analogies are sinking or swimming.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. How am I doing so far? Like 2 for 2, maybe? Or not 2 for 2. Or maybe split down the middle. I mean, 2 fails, 2 passes. That's what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Joe Garifo says, we hear Kratos breathing all the time. I hear his breathing to the point that it's distracting. Is it because he's older? Or they're trying to show that he's more tired?
It's like hearing breathing in a song. If you're listening for it, you're going to hear a lot of breath.
Right.
And now someone's pointed it out. That's going to bother me. Thanks.
Yeah. You got to watch yourself.
I don't think I noticed it much.
You got to learn to ignore it. It's tough.
Also, bad news. You can hear us breathing if you really think about it too, Joe. Kevin writes in and says, shout out to the haptics when in the canoe. I love how you can feel which side the oar is on through the controller, and they do a great job imitating pushing through water with the vibrations. Yeah, canoe haptics, hell yeah. Although Sam Mosley writes in and says, I was surprised by how underused the DualSense is in this game. After playing Astro's Playroom, I couldn't wait to see how the axe would feel in Ragnarok using the adaptive triggers, and it seems like they're just kind of barely used at all.
There's a moment you're chopping something where I feel like they added a little extra, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is like, those couple little chopping scenes. And then like in terms of other stuff with that, when the dogs are pulling you, you can hear like the jingle jangle coming through the controller. I mean, that's all I've really noticed.
The one time that I thought, oh, maybe they could do something. This is like when you power up the axe, like when you put frost on it.
Oh,
I could see them add extra resistance when you throw that thing again. But yeah, it definitely seems like they're picking their moments for that, and it seems maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity.
I wonder if
I think really anything compared to like Astro's Playroom, which was made to show off those elements, is gonna pale in comparison.
And they probably learned the lesson from games like, Call of Duty, where I feel like the first ones for this generation, they were leaning into every gun, the trigger is going to feel different for how much tension is. And then everyone would just turn that off because you don't want that in a competitive sense. So if it's like these weapons are harder to press down in certain situations during fast combat, that would suck. My dog is hip says, what's with all these barrels floating on the water? I feel like I'm playing an N64 Mario Party minigame every time I bump into one. And of course, I'm bumping into all of them for loot. In a game where everything else is so considered, these barrels seem so bizarre.
Yeah, I would take the opposite tack, is that it feels totally in line with the fact that like the game wants to constantly like reward you for everything, where it's like there's always a chest that's just out of vision, and so like this totally makes sense of like, oh, we don't necessarily want you to get bored even when you're sailing around all these beautiful locations. So it's like they gamify the rowing by like, oh, here's a barrel, here's a barrel, here's a barrel. So it just seems in line with like, this game wants you to basically never feel bored.
Yeah, I'm with that. That was my take on it as well. Like the first game, I really loved all of the boating stuff just because of the stories and everything that you like, the dialogue that you hear. And when I was first playing this, I'm like, oh, I'm glad that they kept all that dialogue, but I thought it was like, yeah, it's very gamified in that they were like, well, how could we make it better? Oh, we need them to actually be able to do something physically with the boat, and I don't love it either. Especially because it's like, it's not that big a boat, and like if you're plowing through like several strung, sturdy like boxes, like you're gonna do some damage to your boat.
Yeah, like it's almost a little too gamey where I can feel myself being like, yeah, you want like the extra resources, don't you? Like this is all you. Yeah, exactly. I can feel myself being breadcrumbed in a way that seems like I would just be fine rowing. Like you don't need to entertain me this much. I like you can be a little bit more confident in like trying to like set a narrative that isn't just like constantly going things everyure.
I wonder if there's
the
a lot of
sparkly circles on top of that.
That's right.
Yeah, I like the sparklies. Those are fun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You have to think that maybe they got a lot of feedback from people who are like, oh, it's rowing and boring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how do we make it more fun? And so they just put more prizes out there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was struck. I didn't remember in the first game if they did this, of having just so many boats everywhere. Like in the first area, it's like, okay, you dock here, and then the branching path, and if you need to go back in the water, here's another boat just waiting for you over here. It's just, it's a little bit silly.
It felt a little bit more intimate in that first one, where it seems like you had the one boat that you rode everywhere, versus like this one where it's just like, oh, I guess you just take that boat, I guess.
Remember maybe it's just because, being a Game Informer was kind of the genesis of this, but like the boat stuff was a big deal because remember we asked, I think in like the Rapid Fire with Cory Barlog, we asked him like, what percentage of the game do you spend in a boat? And he's like, this is for 2018s, and he's like, 40%? And remember the internet like melting down, like this is a joke, right? It's like, no. It was real. It's just nobody saw that coming, that in the first game you'd spend that much time in the boat. And he was probably exaggerating exactly how much that was, but it's just weird that God of War is so synonymous with boats now. Instead of just fighting on top of them. Peter Zupke says, in the lore journals, Kratos, this is, by the way, my favorite comment, number one comment here. Peter Zupke says, I think it's really smart. In the lore journals, Kratos has separate sections for friends and another for foes. But when you're playing Atreus, there's a combined section that just says friends and foes. I think the game is tackling the theme of trust, and Kratos views people through a binary lens, while Atreus isn't as quick to judge whether someone is trustworthy or not.
Yeah,
that's a top tier observation.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, 100%.
Kratos is still like, I mean, even the idea of him journaling seems a little weird to me. Of just like, I don't think Kratos does not strike me as the type of person to write down his thoughts. Yeah. But maybe that's kind of the point, is that he's learning to do that. Mm-hmm. But like him still being on like either this person is a god and he's evil, or is like, I've begrudgingly acknowledged that he is helpful, so he is a good person, right? And
on the flip side, it is Atreus being a little more naive than Kratos.
Yeah, but also like they kind of push you towards like there is value in that. It's not necessarily about seeing people as black and white, but also like in Loki comes from like a place of naivety. But Kratos could also learn to not necessarily view people in as like harsh a light as he does. Yeah.
Owen McCarter says there's a journal entry where Kratos mentions the sea captain from the beginning of the first God of War game, and how he regretted his pointless act of killing him. I love the callbacks to the smaller events in the PS2 games.
That's good, man. That's funny.
That's amazing. Also, Justin Ray writes in and says, friendly reminder for everybody that Kratos' white skin was from an oracle's curse that baked the ashes of his dead wife and daughter onto his skin permanently.
Yep.
So just something to keep in mind.
I do.
God, it's wild. I haven't looked it up here. I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but like looking up the sales for those early God of War games versus 2018s, and 2018s is just a landslide. I bet what percentage of people don't know why Kratos' skin is white that have played 2018 in this game? It's got to be 60%, 70%?
Probably a very large number of people.
Yeah, I would
like
even go as far as to say it's probably like 80. I would even go as far as to say.
You'd go so far as to say that?
I would go as far as to say
yeah, because what do we got? The first God of War, 4.62 million copies, and then God of War for 2018, that's 15 million copies. So I can't do the math, but
we got to remember collections and like really long YouTube videos.
That's right.
But also, it's like how many people who played those God of War games would like retain that? How many people have forgotten that part about Kratos?
And how many people are now old enough to play God of War who were not old enough back then?
Right. It is so wild to think about this storyline still going. It's been over 20 years? Yeah, almost 20 years. It's just it's pretty impressive for like this one continuous character to still keep on rolling, no reboots, no nothing.
Right.
Aaron T says, "Hey, Ragnarokers," that's us. Anybody else pleasantly surprised that so many of the big moments from the trailers have already happened? That is delightful.
I can only think of the moments that haven't happened. This is why I don't like to watch trailers.
Yeah. Yep.
It's not like I'm a key little checklist in my mind. It's like there's still some stuff to happen, of course.
Yeah, like the most memorable shot from that story trailer. It's like, okay, that is baked into my brain, and I know, and especially because they're hinting at that a little bit and whatnot. And
so no, I can't say I'm surprised.
Yeah. I don't think I've seen any trailers, so like I
really?
have no context for any of this stuff. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's wild.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I should have read into it a little bit more, but with that story trailer, like that one most memorable shot, dare I say, like it is. You don't see Kratos in that shot. It's just Atreus in there. And so it's like, that should have been more of a hint that maybe you'd be playing him at some point here. Brady Griffith says, Kratos is definitely going to die, right? I thought the prophecy at the end of the last game would be subverted in some way and that Kratos would be alive by the end. But now that we have another playable character, it feels like we'll be exploring the world as Atreus by the end of the game with Kratos dying in some way. What do y'all think? They do remind you early on, Ramir's like, oh, is this all because you were depicted dead in that mural? At the end of the first game, then Krause was like, I don't believe in prophecies or whatever.
That would be a lot of work because if their intention is to have you access every part of the game, even towards the end, that would definitely either require you've been pushed back to before the point of no return and you can go explore, or they're like, well, we have to give Atreus the ability to do everything that Kratos could.
Now you're thinking from the designer's standpoint too much. Kyle's going to hate you. You need to stop.
Yeah. I was very clear about this when we talked about the mythology going into before God of War released.
Yeah.
That I absolutely think that Kratos is going to die and we're going to play as Atreus, and it's not going to be like an endpoint thing. It's going to be maybe in the next section.
Really?
And yeah, I think it's going to happen pretty soon, and then this is going to be Atreus' story.
All of our skill points spent, just trashed like that.
I think you'll keep them and just be able
you'll just have to use like there's like the 1 hour section where it's like I don't know how to use an axe, and then like by the end of it it's like totally you're just back in Kratos, and you also have the ability to use the bow, and that's like the up on the D-pad option is use bow.
So my perspective is like even filthier than like going to like the designer's perspective. I'm thinking of like marketing perspective. You can't kill an icon like Kratos.
Yeah,
you can't close that
filthy.
door.
Oh,
You want
dirty.
movie deal. You want your movie series. Like you want to do so much more with this character. I feel like you can't kill him, and I feel like Atreus is not iconic. You can't put him on the cover of a game. He just doesn't have that much going on for him. So my feeling is like you can't kill this golden goose.
There was some line where they reinforced that idea of, what was it? Where, okay, I'm going to stumble my way through this. At the end of 2018's game, Atreus asked Kratos, like, oh, would that mean that that you would let, oh my God, I'm stumbling so much. Basically, Atreus asked Kratos, like, hey, are you okay with me killing you if it means that it would make me live? And Kratos was like, absolutely. Absolutely no problem there.
Well, this is response to like Kratos killing Baldur and
yes.
Freya's response to it and being like,
right.
Would you react the same way?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
And they're going to talk on the way through this. So, I mean, they've hinted, at least back then, that Atreus killing Kratos is an option, and I think there's some stuff at the end of the first game that hints where it might be going. So I think Kratos is dead by the end of this game. But I think it's but it's also probably going to be couched in that way of, hey, calm down, marketing team. We're going to leave him in kind of a old Snake Captain America situation where he's dead, but also time is a circle, so you never really know. Right, and exactly where you're going,
God of War 3 was like a blood trail, right?
Right, right.
At the end, it's just a shot of like a trail of blood where his body used to be.
Yeah.
So you're just saying something like that?
I think it's going to be he's dead, but there's some magical shenanigans that maybe he's not.
Will they come up with a new death animation? Or will it be exactly the same?
It's called foreshadowing, man.
His story just ragdolls over.
Oh yeah, another thing that I forgot to mention is I think it was a little bit of a tease, looking through the menus where it said, like, instead of Atreus skills, or forget where it is in the menus, but it says like partners or something.
Yeah.
Where I saw that and I was like, oh, okay, this is ambiguous enough where I think they're going to be swapping people around in a big way. Does anybody think we'll control Tyr in this game?
The game is called God of War, technically, so
It
wouldn't be
is.
lying.
It
Wouldn't be lying to
is.
have you play as Tyr.
That's right. Although I remember IGN actually had we talked about it on that podcast, Joe, but IGN had a series of good videos where they had like a Norse mythology expert break down the trailers for God of War and stuff. And he was calling that idea of like Tyr as the God of War. And his angle was like, well, I know we like to say that. They're like, oh, this is the God of this and this is the God of this. But like,
it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way in Scandinavian mythology. It's just, they're just personalities and people
in literally any mythology, it doesn't work that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like you think of like the ancient Greeks and Roman gods as like Zeus is the god of thunder. Like it doesn't really work that way. It's a lot more like Shintoism. Like they're sort of realms of different things. And
they have their specialties, but it's not like I am this. Yeah. All right, well there we go. Hey everybody, you know what that is? That's the bottom of the damn barrel for comments. Everybody who submitted a comment over on Patreon, thank you so much. I'm sorry if your comment was redundant or we didn't get to it for some reason or another, but...
Or Kyle made fun of you.
Or I'm sorry if Kyle was just cruel to every Patreon supporter over there with MinnMax.
What's the ratio of garbage to non-garbage comments?
Yeah.
Tough to say, but yeah, thank you so much.
My request is like no more lip smacking. Like, ask any question, but leave the word lip smacking out of it.
That's right. And as always,
finger licking kills.
Get specific, everybody. This is the place to get specific. I love all those comments over there. Sometimes there are some where it's like, this game's really great. I'm loving it. It's like, that's great. We're all going to be saying that, come up with something that no one else is going to say. Jokes are welcome. So patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. If you support us at any tier, even that $2 tier, you can jump in and submit a comment and we can read it during our next 2 episodes of The Deepest Dive. And also, if I may up the deal, if you support us at any tier on Patreon, even that $2 tier, you can compete in Trivia Tower, which is our game trivia competition. And you can win an Asteroid 40 headset, which is worth hundreds. We have a ton of great game codes to give away. And the next competition is happening on Monday, November 28th. But here's the twist. This episode, we're going to be joined by Isla Hink. And this is the MinnMax versus Easy Allies episode of Trivia Tower. So you can support Easy Allies at any tier, I believe. If you support them in general, I think it'll work. And then you can support MinnMax at any tier on Patreon. And we're just going to be a head-to-head for the communities. So everybody from the Easy Allies community and everybody from the MinnMax community are going to be competing, and we'll put some stakes on it. We'll make it a very serious competition. So again, if you want to help support the Game Club format, if you've enjoyed the best, most thorough discussion about God of War Ragnarok on the internet, you can support that directly and compete in game trivia and a ton of other benefits by going to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Now's the fun part. So this next chunk is gigantic. Everybody has been scaring us that this is the wide middle of the game. And there's a lot of optional side quest content. This might be a beast. All right, so for the next discussion, for The Deepest Dive on God of War Ragnarok, this is a big chunk. This is going to be the biggie. Now, here's the thing. You don't need to finish all of this. Just play what you play and then submit a comment about that over on Patreon. You don't need to blast through it all if it's going to strain you. But we are going to be collecting comments about everything in the game through the quest called Forging Destinies. It might be singular, but I'm scared to Google it. Forging Destiny, Forging Destinies. That is your next stopping point. We're going to be collecting those comments over on Patreon on November 20th, Sunday, November 20th. This is the big middle chunk of the game. There's a lot of side quests that are optional. I've heard it ranges from 10 to 20 hours, depending on how much optional stuff you want to do. So it's a biggie, everybody. So again, we're collecting those comments on November 20th. That is that Sunday, and then we'll be recording on the 21st, and it'll be up on YouTube and in the podcast feed after that for everybody, and then we'll be finishing it off the week after that. We're flying through this sucker, but we appreciate everybody for joining us on this adventure. Hopefully you also agree that this is the best, most thorough discussion about this game on the internet. Hey, if there's somebody going deeper than us, show them to us. Present them. I would like to see
it. It's like a Best
it.
Buy coupon.
That's right. You get your money back.
We'll depth match any competition.
That's right. All right. Thanks so much for supporting this and sharing it with a friend, everybody. We appreciate it. Any wise words, Kyle, before we sign out? Any plugs you got there, man?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
plugs?
great.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know wise words, but I got plugs.
Okay, they're one and the same.
All right. Patreon.com/delayed input, twitch.tv/Kyle Bossman.
Hell yeah. You're going to be streaming Pokemon?
I will be, yep.
That's going to be really fun. Jill, Indie Informer?
Yeah, check me out at the Indie Informer, and you can follow me on Twitter at Finruin, Finruin.
Awesome. There's links below for everybody. Suriel, what do you want to plug, man?
Yeah, patreon.com/Suriel Vazquez. And I'm hoping to have another essay done by the end of the month. We'll see how that goes, considering I have 20 hours of Ragnarok potentially on my plate. And the bugs are not what they seem. I think those bugs are going to be a thing.
That's right. Mark your calendars, everybody. The bugs are a thing. Thanks so much for watching The Deepest Dive. Goodbye. Videos like this are possible because MinnMax is a completely independent outlet for games supported solely by the community. The only reason we don't have to create condescending clickbait is because folks like you click on the subscribe button or check out the benefits over on patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. We think that we're the most efficient gaming outlet out there, so please take a look at what we've done and imagine what more we can do with your support.